All right, everybody. How you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee, joined over on Twitter Spaces by friends of the show and patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporter Shannon, as well as Apostate Nate, also live over on Stereo. Shannon, how you doing?
I'm well, Lee. How are you?
I'm okay. We haven't done a show in a bit, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Really looking forward to hearing everyone's hot takes. Shannon, you're first. We'll do Apostate Nate second, if you can join us as a speaker, Apostate Nate. Shannon, what's on your mind?
The irony of Trump and Vance going to see Les Mis last night.
I heard about
Did you see
this. So
it?
the
Did
irony
you see
because
Kate?
of the storyline of Les Mis, I think
Well,
I'm
yeah,
kind of
and the
familiar with
response.
it.
Yeah, and the responses to reporters. Did you see JD Vance's post on X last night about it?
No, please remind me, and we'll try to find it.
Oh, I'll put it. There you go. I just shared it. I think it might have went up to your. Yeah, it went up to the nest. Sorry, I usually put them down below, but it was. He got rammed about it, thinking it was like Sweetie Todd, but that's cool. You know, Sweetie Todd, Barmer cuts people's heads off. No, slices people's throats
Oh
like it
yeah,
into meat pies. Yeah, a little bit different. The Les
the
Mis,
murdering hair cutter, or no, yeah, was it Johnny Depp was in the movie? I think.
correct. Yes, yes, yes. Sweetie Todd's is a murdering barber that gets revenge by, because his wife was killed, or not killed, taken away by the judge. And he goes on a revenge mission and then his now girlfriend cooks them into meat pies. But yeah, and then uh, Trump was asked on the carpet
So
last
yeah,
night.
so it says by JD Vance about to see Les Mis with POTUS at the Kennedy Center. Oh, hey, that's nice because Trump owns the Kennedy Center now, so it must have been nice to go somewhere you own. Me to Usher. What's this about? A barber who kills people? Yeah. So he clearly did that on purpose. Whether or not that actually happened, I mean, that I think he's, a lot of Republican voters are not into high class culture, musicals, that sort of a thing, especially one that takes place in France.
Yeah, it's about I think it was the first French Revolution where they failed because they don't
Try
win in
again,
the end,
France.
obviously. Yeah, the good people don't win.
All right, so they went to get some culture. I'm sure they snuck in some McDonald's, and you could like just hear the rappers, in the background while they were eating. Okay, so maybe not the best place to go, but once again, Trump has taken over the Kennedy Center, so it does make sense in that way. Let's go and ask Mr. Trump, the president, my constant co-host here on the show. Mr. President, I hear you just went to go see Les Mis, the musical that takes place in France. What do you think about that production?
The musical, it was okay, not the best, not the greatest, but the crowd loved it. And you know why? Because it's a story about winners, about people who don't give up. And that's what America is all about, winning.
Hard to disagree with that, Shannon.
But they lose. The king wins.
I think Trump was talking about the king. I don't. Is he going to root for the downtrodden to come out on top? I wouldn't expect that.
Well, Yeah, I mean, he was asked if he. I'm trying to find the news
That
article.
was the best perplexed sound I've ever heard from you, Shannon.
He was asked if he identified more with Valjean, who's have you seen the movie? Valjean's played by Hugh Jackman,
Maybe a
and
long time ago.
Valjean's played by Hugh Jackman in the movie, and the sheriff dude is played by Russell Crowe. It's Valjean and
All
uh,
fine French actors coming to America, making it big, and returning to their homeland for the quintessential. I'm a French actor, and now I'm in Les Mis. Oh no, Hugh Jackman's from Australia. Russell Crowe's often thought of as being from
he's
Australia,
from
but he's actually
Australia
from
too,
New
right?
Zealand. No,
Oh,
he's a
okay.
Kiwi. Yeah, but yeah, close enough. So okay, so some interesting. It's like when Mel Gibson was in The Patriot. Like, oh,
Right.
he's also
Or
from that's
Braveheart
Mad
for that
Max
matter.
or Braveheart. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he got some boos, got some yell, some cheers. But he turned to Melania and said, I'll let Melania answer that. And Melania just stood there looking away.
Well, I mean, that's kind of tried and true for the president's wife, right? His lovely wife. They're so in love. She just supports everything he says by not adding a lot of her own input and just kind of looking away. I remember when he was getting reelected, it came out that she was releasing a memoir or something where she like blatantly supported a woman's right to choose, abortion.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't remember hearing more about that later on, but I guess that came out or that yeah, that would have come out by now.
Yeah. I think it was her memoir there after his first term.
We haven't gotten to this story yet, and I don't know if we'll get to it today. It's a bit old, but I think it's really important. The French president, is it Samuel? It's Macron, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
His wife hit him in the face while they were in view on the French Air Force One, Le Air Force One, whatever that's called. I think this happened in Vietnam, and she clearly hit him in the face, and he was startled by it, and then realized you could see him through the door. And then they came out. He tried to grab her hand as they were going down, and she didn't take it. Um, this is a clear example of spousal abuse at the highest level in French politics, and it died much like his wife may kill him within a couple days. Can you imagine if he had hit her? The outcry, the rage. Remember when the first Donald Trump presidency, they're like, Melania, blink if you need help. They were worried he was abusing her and she was in a situation she couldn't escape. Clearly not the case. But I remember hearing that over and over again. And now the actual wife, who is his former teacher, who's much older than him, so weird from the get go, hits him in the face. And the world doesn't care. The story goes away. Is that equal? I don't recall ever
Maybe.
seeing a video of Donald Trump hitting his wife in public in the face.
Maybe it's a sexual thing. Maybe he likes it.
See, but that's where your mind goes. You wouldn't say that if it was the other way around. You wouldn't, Shannon.
That's true. I probably wouldn't think the same thing the other way around.
Yeah, and
But
it's
if he
fine. I
didn't,
mean, like, he's okay, but he's in an abusive relationship. Like he is. The president of France is being abused by his wife. I'm sharing this now over on my video streams. Go to bit.ly/NEWZ debates for all those links. This is from May 26th. Macron dismisses viral video showing apparent shove from wife. Brigitte? It's not a shove. She hit him in the face. He's dismissed a viral video showing his wife pushing his face away. I love how they describe this, and they won't even describe that she hit him in the face in the title. Once again, liberal CNN, liberal New York Times, almost every other thing other than Fox News and a few up and coming and blog things out there, it's all run by people who are on the left. And okay, I understand why. You can imagine it's not designed that way, but it just happened naturally. I think it's designed that way and it happens naturally. They just as they disembarked from a plane in Vietnam on the first leg of a Southeast Asia tour. This happened at the end of May. He says, there's a video showing me joking and teasing my wife, and somehow that becomes a sort of geoplanetary catastrophe. Oh, sorry, I did not share this. Let me bring this up. Why is this not being shared? Oh, I did.
Well,
I
their
see it pull up.
relationship's weird anyways, because she met him when
She is
she
his
was
teacher.
40 and he was 15.
Yeah. And we would think about that differently if he was a she and she was a he. We absolutely
Oh,
would. No
no, I
one
think
would be
it's
okay
weird
with that.
anyways.
Yeah, but it's weird and it's just like pushed aside.
Yeah, I mean,
Macron
that
acknowledged
would
the
be
footage
child
was
molestation.
genuine, but criticized how it had been weaponized. The videos are all real, and yes, sometimes people tamper with them, but people are attributing all kinds of nonsense to them. I'll play the clip here. This is from CNN. I know you can't see it, Shannon, but you may have seen this earlier.
This short video of President Macron and his wife Brigitte pushing his face as
She
they
hit
land in
him in
Vietnam
the
is going
face.
viral and has caught the
He was shoved backwards. She punched him in the chin, as you can just see right now. And he was pushed backwards, and then he noticed that they were standing in the door, and then all of a sudden starts smiling and turns the politics on.
attention of Russian trolls. Later, Macron appears to offer his arm, but France's First Lady opts to hold the railing instead. The
Opts to hold the railing instead. Yeah, it's just, you know what? Some things, like, if people get divorced today, the kids are more likely to go with the mother, and it was even more so in the past. If there's anything going on and the cops don't want to believe the wife, that happens, I think, more often than it should. Clearly that's an issue. But sometimes the wife in the relationship has the upper hand, and she uses it to punch the French president in the chin.
Well, I mean, really, she's a groomer, right? I mean, she met him as a teacher,
Oh, she's a
and he
groomer.
was 15. He was 15, she was 40, and they got married when he got out of whatever their primary school is at 17. So,
They waited till he graduated 5th grade. Yeah, and then they decided to tie the knot.
but I mean, that's child molestation, no matter how you turn it, and grooming.
Well, I mean, you can imagine something happened between them when he was still in school, or we can imagine they liked each other. Like, I had female teachers I liked growing up. I had male teachers I liked growing up. And then later, you know, um, you can
Yeah,
imagine
but at
something
17,
happens.
17
But
would you say, whatever
is
you
that
do, I'll marry
is
you?
that when is that when their relationship started? They didn't get married when he was 17, did they?
Uh, at 17, he said, whatever you do, I'll marry you. That's
Oh,
what he
okay,
told
that's
her.
the thing? But they didn't
So,
they okay,
yeah.
alright. So you're right, creepy as fuck. Now, it is France, so, some things are allowed in France versus here, but you're right. If it was the other way around, no one would stand for that. I think even in France, that would be a problem. Just like if he had hit her in the chin, that I think he would not be president anymore. I absolutely believe if it had been the other way around, I don't know how the impeachment process works in France. I think he would have just had to resign. Absolutely.
Trying to see what age they actually got married. She was 54 when they got married, so he must have graduated college.
Yeah, he was moved out from mom and dad's house. You know, he was a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there is grass on the field, yeah, I feel like it's a little different in France. But for all the creepiness that their relationship has together, and I've seen online things about how it's a sham marriage, and you know she was a teacher he looked up to, and they had a good relationship, and they decided, well, we're just going to get married, and well, you can imagine. Uh, Maybe he plays for the other team if that's the case. But I've heard a lot of different things. Whatever the situation is, this is certainly a new update that the world has forgotten.
But their marriage has lasted. What's 2007? So
That's
what's
your
that?
mark of success.
What is that? 18 years? I don't know. It seems to be working for them. I mean, he could escape now. He's the president.
So when all those people were worried about Melania, we could have just said, well, you know, they've been together a long time. He clearly could have any woman he wanted, and he's stuck with her. It must be true love. Once again, I don't think you'd be saying these things, Shannon, if the shoe was on the other foot.
Oh, absolutely not. No. I understand your point completely. I don't know. I find their whole relationship, both relationships, Melania and Macron's, or Trump and
Really,
Macron's.
you're comparing the president and
Oh,
his wife with the fresh
no.
president? I mean, like, clear. I
No,
see Trump's
Melania just looks
relationship
like
very clearly. He wanted to bang someone who was much younger, who was a model, and she was like, "Yes, I want your money."
that's Melania just looks like she's desperate for him to go away. Just she's surprised he's still alive with his McDonald's diet.
I don't know.
Where
Has he ever hit her in the chin? I
uh,
feel like, you know, I feel
not that
like
we know of.
Melania would be able to divorce. See, you say not that we know of, but I mean, like, there's evidence of the French president being hit by his wife in the face. I really think if Melania wanted to get away, all she would have to do, because they clearly spend a lot of time away from each other. He's always here, there. She has her own initiatives, like every first lady. Plus, Trump, I think, is out of the White House and in his different properties more than any other president. That's often been criticized, rightfully so. But you know, he owns a lot of stuff. I don't know that we've had a president like him who just has this real estate everywhere, has his business interests, and we can discuss whether or not that's appropriate. But he has them, and the other presidents really have not. If she wanted to, I think she has ample opportunity to, you know, file for divorce, say anything she wants about the president, and bring him down. Now, could he go after her? Of course, but I feel like she would have enough protection, and she's already been dragged through the mud for all the reasons you can assume, being the president's latest wife. If she wanted to get away, I
I,
think she easily could.
I only say we don't have proof is because he did abuse his first wife, according to their divorce proceedings. So
Well,
that's
according
yeah,
probably to what was said in the divorce proceedings, but he's never been
right.
convicted or charged with that
Correct.
crime.
Absolutely not. He has not been convicted or charged even. But yeah, she said, or his first one, the one that's buried in the golf course there. Uh,
Oh no. Oh no, that's not. She died of natural causes, did she?
falling down the stairs, yes. But yeah,
Wow,
according
that
to
was one hell of a
the
doorknob she ran into. May she rest in peace. Wow, okay, so I didn't realize, I guess because he's really old, so his first wife passed away.
yeah, is that his first wife? First, that was yeah, that's Junior's wife, right?
This is
Or Junior's
this is
mother.
like
Sorry, Junior's mother.
this is like a cat's 9 lives being counted. So we'll be here all day if we start trying to keep track of Donald Trump's wives. But whatever the case, I never liked the criticisms of Melania other than the fact that there are nude photos of her. And Trump has been married multiple times, which is, I believe, not usually the case. Um, Reagan, I think, as well, if memory serves, but don't quote me on that. But
Yes,
just
Reagan
the
was married
criticisms of
previously.
her, like, yeah, she never smiles. And by the way, there's like a cultural reason for that they explained, or she seems dumb or something like, I mean, like all these different criticisms. And then Melania, blink if you need us to rescue you, like all that stuff was way inappropriate. Democrats would never do that to their own. Um, Now, to be fair, Trump is unique, so you can sort of forgive some of that. But once again, final cherry on top of all of this, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was hit in the face by his wife, clearly startled, like started to fall backwards, and then realized they were in the open door to the plane and people could see inside. And then afterwards, there was a noticeable lack of affection between the two as they walked down those, presidential stairs. And the world talked about it for a day and a half. This is an old
I hadn't
story I've
even heard
had,
of it until you
packed
just said
away.
it. I
You
haven't heard of
hadn't
it
even
until you
heard
just
of
said
it.
no. And I'm on most of the sites, I know about most anything that we covered here, but I hadn't heard that one.
You use
I
CNN
just
so much they want to charge you, right?
right, yep, I have a paywall on CNN.
This is what we get, and we can jump over to this at some point, but I'll just table it for now. It looks like they're going to defund NPR and PBS and maybe some other things. And if the shoe fits, I would say less so PBS because their content is mostly not news. You have to tune in on PBS to watch the news. NPR is 24/7 news, basically. The flagship stations and then the affiliates that get some of their content, those are mostly news stations. There's a little show here and there that's not, but that's what NPR does. And once again, is it designed that way to have a liberal bias, or is it because people who are liberal go into news, or when you go into news, you become liberal? I think it's all of the above. But the end result is that NPR is so biased. It's MSNBC, but funded by the government. Not entirely, but the government gives them money. I am absolutely 100% okay with not giving federal funds to NPR anymore and let them run on their own. And if their content is not valuable enough, then let them fall apart. I have more nuanced feelings about PBS because, once again, I don't think PBS is a news content provider overall. I think that's a small portion of the valuable programming that they provide. Now, is Sesame Street infused with a liberal bias? Absolutely. But I think the value they provide is much more of a bargain you can make, that they're educating and giving quality content to children of many different types of parents, including conservative parents. And while they might not agree with some of the things that have happened on Sesame Street, the last decade or however long they've started to do some things that have pissed people off, um, I think the bargain can be made. I don't see that value with NPR. Now, if you like NPR content, I don't know that they falsify reports, but they certainly don't report many things, and they focus on things that they don't need to focus on, given the electorate, the amount of people in the United States, and what really affects them. So yeah, I'm sort of
Well,
okay with that.
Netflix saved Sesame Street and is keeping them on public TV. You
They're
know that, right?
funding them now.
Yeah, Netflix, yeah, bought them and is going to keep them on PBS as well.
So I don't know. Did they buy them? Is Sesame Street something that you can buy?
Yeah, there you go. I put it down below. They made a deal to
I
keep
could
them on
understand
there.
funding them, but they actually own them. I thought Sesame Street would have. I guess maybe I assumed, but I could be wrong. I thought since it has been
I
on
think
PBS
Jim
so
Henson
long, if
was.
it didn't come from
I think.
PBS, I thought there was some sort of ownership there, but I could be wrong. All
I
right, let's
think
look at this.
Jim Henson owned part of it or something, and that's the part they bought. Like Jim
Part,
Henson's estate.
yeah, part could be like a
But
baseball team where you can own part of it. All right, so this is the BBC from May of this year. Sesame Street and Netflix have struck a deal that will see the popular TV show appear on the streaming platform after President Donald Trump pulled funding for the free-to-air public broadcasting service. I think this was an executive order because there is something going through Congress right now that will defund it. So maybe that was a small amount of defunding, or that was a threat that they thought was going to go through. I just saw a report that Congress is passing or has passed the defunding of things like NPR and PBS. So I'm not sure exactly what level we're talking
I
about
put the
here of
newest one.
defunding.
I put the newest
Yeah,
one down
thank you.
below
We'll get
about
to that.
yeah.
Netflix offers its 300 million subscribers a new season of the show and 90 hours of previous episodes. It will also be available on PBS as well. Sesame Street was facing an uncertain future after entertainment giants Warner Bros. Let's not say bros, that sounds bad. Warner Brothers, abbreviated Bros Discovery, which owns the HBO platform, did not renew its deal with the half-a-century-old program. Earlier this month, Trump issued an executive order to block federal funding for PBS and National Public Radio, but it's also through Congress, so we'll have to kind of cut that apart and see what all that means. Under the deal, PBS will get access to Sesame Street episodes the same day that they're released on Netflix. In the late 1960s, Sesame Street co-founders Lloyd Morissette and Joan Gans Cooney approached Harvard University's Graduate School of Education with a novel way of teaching American children. A team led by a developmental psychologist worked with the Sesame founders to analyze childhood psychology and produce entertaining lessons. They worked with Muppets creator Jim Henson to create characters like Big Bird, which made the set to look like an urban street. Since its first airing in November of 1969, millions of children have grown up with the show's theme. Can you tell me how to get to Sesame Street? During a childhood obesity epidemic in the US in 2006, Sesame Street aired health habits segments designed to teach kids about diet and exercise. I remember this. Look at this. The Cookie Monster declared cookies a sometimes food and taught children about a balanced diet. I think I remember watching a clip where he went on like a show. And it was like, up next, our interview with Cookie Monster. And he's like, yeah, sometimes food. Michelle Obama also visited to film a segment on healthy eating. So it doesn't tell us about how all this works. I guess PBS just licenses it. But yes, it was not that they purchased them. It was like I thought they are now funding them. And they have
Yeah, I
a
just spoke. I'm
shared
sorry.
deal between Netflix and PBS. No, that's fine. I just want to that seemed a little strange to me. So it's I'm wrong all the time. Don't worry about it.
It's a distribution deal.
Yeah, and then you have
Sesame Street's still owned by Sesame Workshop, which I think is Jim Henson's one of
Could
Jim
be,
Henson's
yeah.
foundations.
You have a screenshot here. I'm going to pull up. Thank you for that.
It was a long article, and I didn't want you to go through the whole thing trying to find what I was trying to tell you.
Oh no. Oh yes, no. Okay, so these are questions and it's giving answers. So Netflix owns Sesame Street? No. They signed a distribution deal. It's always been owned by Sesame Workshop. When you were a kid, it was probably the Children's Television Workshop, but it's the same thing. Sesame was never publicly owned. It received funding from PBS and aired on PBS, but it was owned by the Sesame Workshop. It's a nonprofit, always been privately owned. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. if it wasn't owned by the government, this is what I would have guessed it would be, is that it's been funded by them. But I assume Sesame Street was not making money. So being a nonprofit perfectly fits the bill. All that makes sense. And then, yeah, we're going to get this thing up here. I saw Apostate Nate. Yeah, Apostate Nate, join us in a moment. I just want to finish this whole train of thoughts. So let me bring up this CNBC article. Thank you for this, Shannon. Oh, also, I might actually have an updated one of this. I had this ready for the show.
That was the newest one I could find marked 6 hours ago. So
It says June 11th, but maybe that's the update. Yeah, that's fine then. No, I think I don't. I saw that, didn't pull it up. So yeah, we'll use this. Thank you for that. All right, so from CNBC, the House on Wednesday moved a step closer to approving President Donald Trump's $9.4 billion spending cut package, which would codify some cuts originally proposed by the Department of Government Efficiency, which is DOGE. The package would grant permission to the White House not to spend billions of dollars that had already been approved by Congress. The money would be clawed back from specific agencies like USAID. I thought that was already dead, but I guess they're going to kill it even more. And public broadcasting, which distributes federally appropriated grants to National Public Radio and the Public Broadcasting Service. Okay, so this is how the math works. Corporation for Public Broadcasting sends money to NPR and also PBS. So I guess that's the above organization. Although the Wednesday vote passed largely along party lines, a final vote expected Thursday. Oh, yes, I think this already happened. I think they did pass this. Whatever it said, I think it's going to go. Whatever I heard, I think it's going to go through at this point, and they're going to defund PBS, which I am not so happy about, but can understand. And they're going to defund NPR, which I 100% support. I don't see the value of spending taxpayer dollars on something that is so biased. Once again, I'm not saying that they just make stuff up, but the way they report and the things they don't report is clearly biased. Okay, it's News Debate. I'm Lee. We're live over on Stereo. Leave us a voice message. Also, vote in our poll. Choice 1 says, need troops in LA. Number 2, better without. My votes, need troops in LA. We can discuss, is it Marines? Is it the California National Guard? But I am done. I am not just going to say like, oh, the vast majority of protesters were peaceful when just stuff gets blown up. That's a lie. It might be a factual truth, but it omits all the destruction. You know, if you say, well, this water, the vast majority of people who drink it don't die. If 1 out of 100 dies, you got to fix the water. No one sits there and said, well, the vast majority of people who go to this hospital are not killed by malpractice. That's not how we operate. We do operate that way with guns in the US. We say, well, the vast majority of gun owners are responsible and law abiding. Yeah, well, what about the people who aren't? That's the bargain where that works in the United States, unfortunately. It doesn't work with protests. It doesn't work with malpractice. It doesn't work with water safety. So, yes, I think we do need troops in California. Should Trump have, okay, Governor Gavin Newsom, can you send in some National Guard? Should there have been a conversation? Probably, but it's Trump, so I'm not surprised there wasn't. And all he has to do is send in federal forces like the Marines if people don't like him using the National Guard. So it's a workaround. It's not going to stop him. And I 100% support that when stuff's being blown up, we need to beat the crap out of people to stop them from doing that. Let's target the people who are the minority. So if the majority of people there are happy and just protesting, don't target them. But also, that's a dick move. If you know that stuff's being blown up and people are being hurt and you're still out there supporting that, knowing that that's a byproduct of you being out there, you're a dick. Stay home. If you want to start protesting and everything goes according to plan, stay out there. But when it turns violent, you're supporting violence. Remember? Silence is violence, everybody. Okay. Apostate Nate, great to have you. You've been waiting patiently. Sorry we went out on a big journey and we finished that. Apostate Nate, how you been?
Oh, goodly. I put my hand up because people have been part of my journey. The affiliate where I live, of course, is also the affiliate that gave us the production of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Um, Another stable, beloved PBS program. I don't really want to speak to the broader politics of it, Lee, but I have a fascinating journey in my own history, especially recent history. In 2023, I was a guest at Western Psychiatric Hospital in southwestern Pennsylvania, and there was absolutely during my 7 day stay there very little to do for as expensive as those stays can be. There's not much amenities, so to speak, but they did have some radio headphones, just cheap plastic headphones that did nothing but give you some radio access. And it was hard to pick up a lot of things, but we were sitting basically right on top of the affiliate PBS station, that played classical music 24 hours a day. And this is a station I had listened to for years, sort of off and on, but this was all I had to do. So I would put on these headphones and just kind of walk in figure eights um, around the main room and the hallway and the facility. And I credit listening to that music there with sort of keeping my sanity. And so ever since that Staley, I keep that station running in my house all the time, even if I have to turn the volume down. There's a radio in my bedroom that plays it constantly. I've actually
Pennsylvania NPR, classical music to keep you sane.
it did, Lee, and I actually they yanked my headphones from me at 10 p.m. every night, and so I said the heck with that. When I got out of there, I went on to
I don't
Amazon.
want to belittle you, apostate Nate, but are
Yeah,
you sure that the headphone thing they gave you had batteries in it and they didn't just hand you something and it's like he thinks he's listening to music?
Lee, I would have thought that, but I was able to find the same headphones on Amazon.com, and sometimes after 10 o'clock, I'll just put them on and do a chore because I can now. Because nobody can come and take them away from me. So anyway, the point of all this is that if my classical radio station gets taken away, I will be very upset. Now I
You know
can
what?
find
So
classical
this is
music.
a really good point. Like I
Yeah.
said, PBS I don't define as a news organization. NPR I would define as a news organization, but this is a much needed nuance. There are NPR stations that mostly, if not always, just play classical music or something like that. Now, are they going to suffer? My guess is yes. But I believe, and Shannon did tweet a new article that we can get to with some more updated figures here. I believe the funding cuts are going to be for the flagship NPR Washington, D.C. operation. The rest of those stations, like the one you're listening to, I think are described as affiliates. So they can receive NPR programming from the flagship stations in DC, and maybe there's one in Chicago or something like that. And they have to fundraise on their own and maybe get funding from grants in the state or something like that. But I thought this was attacking NPR headquarters, and all of those other stations were more or less independent, but they used NPR content. Do you know if that's wrong?
It Boy, Lee, that sounds right to me, and I hope you're right because I think that bodes well for the survival of my station, which may have to either eliminate news content altogether or find someone who will give it to them.
So let's see if we can stay with us, Apostate Nate. I want to hear more about
And
this,
by the
and I
way, Lee, real
appreciate
quick,
you. Oh yeah, yeah.
Lee, this is really important. They do play NPR news at the top of every hour, so that is important on my classic.
Off with their heads. Off with their heads. Off with their heads. So I
This is
thought
not
that
Les
NPR.
Mis.
That's not lame. Yeah. If only I had a Les Mis reference here. I'd have to start singing. You don't want that. So I thought there was some money that exchanged hands between affiliates and NPR headquarters, NPR huge stations for content they used. That makes sense to me because that's how everything else works. But maybe because NPR stations are non-commercial stations, if you listen to NPR stations anywhere, they don't run ads like your local rock station. It's a different licensing from what I've read. So I thought money exchanged hands, but maybe it's because they're a non-commercial station. They just have access to this. At some point, I think you have to pay to be an NPR member affiliate station, and whether or not that's for all the content you use or you just pay and you get access to as much content as you want. I believe there's some money involved because once again, if you defund PBS and NPR from the federal government, they still have other funding mechanisms. So it doesn't automatically equal we don't have NPR flagship headquarters stations and we don't have PBS. It's a kick in the crotch, it's a kick in the pants, but it doesn't automatically mean that. So maybe we can ask ChatGPT some of these questions. But this is the update from CBS News. And Apostate Nate, stay with us because I really appreciate you sharing your story and I want to hear more about this. But I want to get to some facts here rather than just trying to guess. The looming federal funding cuts, writes CBS News, to public television and radio would overwhelmingly gut outlets in states won by President Trump in 2024, according to a new congressional report. Approximately 60% of the hundreds of radio and television stations that could suffer funding cuts are in Trump won states. The organizations that would be affected include public media outlets in cities as large as Houston and Miami, as well as smaller stations in tiny communities like Douglas, Wyoming, which has a population of 6,000 and hosts the Wyoming State Fair. Wow, that must be a good time. The widespread cuts to public radio and television are a component of a Republican congressional plan to eliminate $9 billion in funding for programs approved before President Trump's second term began. So once again, these were approved. They're now passing legislation to undo that, but that's legal. You can undo things that were approved previously. You might not like it, but what they're doing, I believe, is 100% legal and democratic. The proposed recessions package, which is scheduled for a House vote Thursday. So once again, I think this passed. I'm 95% sure this passed. Included 1.1 billion in cuts for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which provides funding to NPR and PBS. The cuts are being touted by the Trump administration and other Republicans as an effort to slash taxpayer funding for news media outlets they accuse of being liberal or politically biased in their content, which I believe is correct. I believe that is a very objective, easy to see and understand set of facts. Okay, so I guess I was wrong. The list of hundreds of TV and radio outlets facing funding cuts shows a broad range of impact. I'm surprised that the federal government is funding stations across the country. If they are, I don't think it's enough to immediately shut them down, but will once again be a kick to the stones. Major public television and radio stations in Charlotte and DC could each lose nearly 1 million in grants in the coming months. That's not a lot. To be honest, I don't think that's a lot in the grand scheme of things. An FM community public radio station in Carbondale, Colorado, which touts itself as public access radio that connects community members to one another in the world, received $145,000 in federal grant funding last year. Okay, I'm starting to make sense of this. If you are
It
an
passed the,
NPR, I'm sorry, Shannon.
oh, it passed the House. I put a new one down below 214 to
Okay,
212. Now it has
passed
to
the
go to the
House.
Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's going to the Senate. Thank you. I was 95% sure, but Couldn't say it exactly, and now we know that. So I think this is what this means. Every year, you do not just receive money from the government if you are a PBS station or you are a NPR station. If you are the headquarters in DC, maybe that is not the case. Maybe you just regularly receive funding from them, but you also get your own funding. What this is all about is that the government has been giving out grants to PBS stations and NPR stations across the country, which I believe means they just maintain their membership with the flagship organization in DC. So a station can become an NPR affiliate. It can unbecome an NPR affiliate. I believe it's a choice, and I think there's some cash associated with that, but you get to use their content, so I guess it's worth it. But if you are receiving grants now, so you have applied for a grant in the past, somehow you got a grant and are currently receiving it, because you can imagine grants are not forever. They have probably a shelf life. It lasts until this time. It's going to be this amount of money. That grant is going to end prematurely. Maybe it will never go to you, but you expected to receive it because it was in the budget that has already been passed, and this is trying to undo that. But it is not directly taking money from NPR and PBS member stations that they regularly receive every year, as if they are one of your kids in college and they know you give them a certain amount of money every month to pay their housing, that sort of a thing. This is not a salary that you're getting from a job. This is a grant. If I'm wrong, I will try to update that, but I believe that's the situation. At each of the public media outlets, the list shows reductions that are sizable enough to potentially require staffing cuts. It's potentially big enough to potentially mean people could get fired. Programming reductions or news cutbacks that threaten to exacerbate shortages of local news content. Um, if they reported more equally, maybe I would feel bad about that. I don't feel bad about that. Talking more about how red states are going to be hurt the worst. Both PBS and NPR have sued the Trump administration over previous executive orders. So this is what he was doing previously, cutting their funding. NPR CEO Catherine Marr, Bill Maher's wife, no, has said roughly 1% of the organization's budget comes directly from federal dollars. So if we get rid of 1%, this means the end of NPR? Of course not. I think any company could deal with a 1% reduction. If it's competitive, not sure if NPR the DC stuff is competitive. All right, that's, I think, the most that we can get from that. Thank you for Shannon for giving me that. All right, so Apostate Nate, are you with us as a speaker? Apostate Nate's back to a listener. Apostate Nate, if you want to join us again, I'd love to hear more about your NPR journey. And Shannon just tweeted an executive order from the White House that previously came out. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I had to
there's
put it down below
executive
because it took the
orders
White
and
House. It took the whitehouse.gov that I put up there as the link, but I put the actual link to the executive order down below it.
yeah, I don't think we need to. I appreciate that, but I think we get the gist here. There's been some executive actions. There's what's going through Congress now, has passed the House and now has to go through the Senate. I assume this is going to happen. I feel bad for PBS. I don't feel bad for NPR. And at least with NPR, I don't think we should feel too bad no matter what, because it's only 1% of federal funding for federal NPR in DC. And member stations that are receiving grants, okay, that sucks. If you were promised a grant, I would say maybe legally they should carry that through. But I'm sure in the fine print, it's allowed that we're giving you this grant day to day, and at any time it could be rescinded for any reason. And that's just the gamble you face when you receive grants from the government. And to be frank, when tens of millions of Americans don't have health insurance and we have a homeless epidemic in the United States and all of these other problems, you get hit by a car and you have insurance, you get cancer, you're still fucked. I'm not sure that I care about NPR affiliate stations in North Carolina who are losing some staff members potentially because they're losing their grants. I know the Trump administration is not going to take this money and give it to homeless and people without health insurance. But in the United States, where we are the one advanced country, we're the one world power that has nothing the rest of the world powers have. Um, I just don't want to spend money on NPR. It doesn't mean we're going to spend money on more useful things, but just that's just how America is. And if we're not having all these useful things, I don't want to spend it on NPR. NPR is a propaganda tool for the Democratic Party for liberal agendas. Does it report real news? Yes. Does it report important news? Yes. Does it report news in places where there's not a lot of other options for news? Yes. All those things are true, but it's still propaganda. It is still
But it's supposed to have a military
propagandized,
parade.
I guess,
Woo!
is the better way to do it. Yeah, see, Shannon, once again, this is why I say we're not going to take the money and give it to the people who need it. But in a
Right,
country where
absolutely.
Democrats and Republicans don't help poor people and never have and never will, I don't want to spend money on NPR. Why am I wrong? Tell me why I'm wrong. Apostate Nate, tell me why I'm wrong. People on stereo, leave a message. Why am I wrong?
Oh, I don't think you're wrong. I just think they're
Really?
talking about all
You're
this
going
propaganda.
with my defund NPR argument. I'm surprised.
I don't. I can understand your point of view. I can understand. I don't know if they're. I suppose they are biased left leaning. I wouldn't say they're as bad as MSNBC. I would say they are left leaning,
I
absolutely,
would
but
say that that's
like not like
that's like
MSNBC
a
leaning.
horse's hair that you could fit between NPR and MSNBC on the liberal spectrum.
Really, you think they're that bad? I didn't think.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't
How much
say
do
they
you
were
listen
hard
to
left.
NPR?
I don't listen. I usually read their articles, not.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Here's the
Oh,
difference. This
that's
is what I will say. Is that if you go to the NPR website and you look at specific articles rather than just read what they throw out. So if you read every article for a day versus I went to the website and I read the articles I was interested in. I think their reporting is perfectly fine if you piecemeal ingest it. But if you listen to NPR for several hours and listen to their reports, I think it's just as bad as MSNBC. Now it's slower, the presentation is different, but I think it's just as bad as MSNBC. Now they don't have like a Rachel Maddow show, so I would say MSNBC news coverage as opposed to like a Rachel Maddow program. But I think it's par and par.
that could be absolutely true. As I said, I don't listen to it. I just when an article comes up because that's one of the stations that come up in my algorithm when I read news stuff, but I don't actually listen to them.
And that's a feather in the cap of NPR is that, okay, they're going to lose money, but NPR has arguably more ways to reach you than ever before. You can imagine that, 40 years ago, listening to NPR, there were more people listening. It was a more important thing to have the radio signal. But with streaming and podcasts and just putting news articles on their website, that was not something they did 40 years ago. NPR didn't release newspapers. They can reach you more than ever before. They have more ways to advertise than ever before. The way they advertise is very different than other media outlets, especially on radio signals. I believe the licensing is different, so they can't do some things on a website. I assume they could do whatever they wanted. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just guessing. But, if there was a time for NPR to lose funding, I could be wrong. I assume it's better today than it would have been 40 years ago. 40 years ago, they had the radio station. They had to get you to call in. You had to be at home where there was a phone. You had to be at work where there was a phone to call in and pledge money. And then what do you do? Send them a check afterwards? I mean, like, it's way different now. So if they were going to lose money, I think now's the time. Reggie tweets, the government shouldn't be funding any news. You know what? That's another argument. I like the BBC. I think it's a very strong outlet. I think the BBC is less biased than NPR, to be completely honest, and I think that's not a close comparison. I think they're very far apart, especially on certain issues. So I'm not against the government funding news, but again, in the American context, I completely understand and in many ways can support the idea that the American government should not be funding news. Can the British government fund news? And should they? Absolutely 150%. Should other governments fund news? Not talking about, Iran or something like that, then yes, I would say if you've been doing it for a while and it's as strong as the BBC, like go ahead and do that. In America, I get the idea. Like we're never going to get rid of guns. We'll never make progress on that. We can make small changes. The UK is different. So yeah, I think Reggie has a point. Reggie, request to speak. I'd love to hear your perspective. Apostate Nate tweets, I'll be back to speaking on Twitter Spaces soon. NPR is clearly slanted. Its presentation could be more objective, and it isn't. Is the solution to defund? Not sure. That's another good point, and I'd love to hear that perspective. Apostate Nate, please join us over on Twitter Spaces. Leave a message on Stereo. If NPR has problems, is the thing you want to do to defund it? I would ask the same question going back in the past when people are shouting Black Lives Matter, defund the police. Is the solution to bad policing less police and less money? Clearly, those people were wrong. And cities across the country returned funding after taking it away. And many cities, we talked about it on this show, actually increased funding after they quote unquote defunded police. They resumed the previous level and actually increased it. I would not say the value of NPR is the same as something like policing. I know that I brought up that example, so not to throw you under the bus, Apostate Nate. I was the one who brought up the analogy, but I don't know if giving NPR more money fixes bias. Could it make it so that they have less errors in their reporting? So in their biased, slanted news, are there less factual errors? I assume so. If you gave more money to any news outlet, they could have more fact checkers. Are they going to spend it on that? Who knows? But I assume there would be better product from any news organization that you gave more money. But specifically ideology, the choosing of stories, the ignoring of other stories, I don't think that changes by keeping the money with NPR. I don't think it changes by giving them more money. Now, that's NPR federal. That's the flagship stuff from DC. If you talk about some station in North Carolina that's receiving $145,000 grants, I don't know that there's a way to even measure the bias of stations across the country, but at least so far on the show, we all seem to agree that NPR anywhere is producing stories. Maybe in rural Montana, it's a more conservative slant. I assume that's not the case almost anywhere, though, because those people probably wouldn't want to work for NPR. Whatever the case, these sort of decisions have a lot of repercussions, and I'm okay with them. Yes, Shannon.
Is PBS, because PBS is public broadcasting stations, right? So they're the TV, and then NPR is radio.
Generally, yeah.
Are they connected? Just two different parts of the same corporation? Like one does broadcasting, one does radio?
So that
Or
was
are
in
they
this
two separate
article.
corporations?
Let me find this. That was in this article. So there's a overreaching organization that funds both of them, And this congressional legislation would defund that organization, which then defunds PBS and NPR. Corporation for Public Broadcasting provides funding to NPR and PBS. So the cuts will be Corporation for Public Broadcasting cuts, but they trickle down to NPR and PBS.
Okay, does PBS doesn't run any specific news stations, right? They're not part of
PBS has news
MSNBC or-
programs.
Oh, okay. all right.
And news programs, I believe, are carried on most, if not all. There might be some sort of fine print. If you're a PBS affiliate, you have to carry these news programs. I assume that's more of a choice that everyone makes. But there are flagship PBS news programs that come out of major cities like DC. I know there's flagship NPR affiliate content that comes out of both DC, New York, Chicago. I think it's a more varied sort of network, where PBS, I think, is more comes from DC or something. But whatever the case, PBS stations will also have local coverage. So if you watch PBS, you could see our governor is going to be on today. That's not going to be on your national PBS. So any PBS station, in theory, will have a mixture of national news, local news, but that will depend on local funding. But I think everyone probably has some local news show. And then also This Old House and Sesame Street, and perhaps even some sort of talk program for your local area that's maybe not news, but it's culture, but they discuss news items, that sort of a thing. But the reason I said NPR is a news organization is that if you listen to an NPR station and it's not just music, it's news constantly. And they will have local news updates during the federal programs, the nationwide programs. They'll take local news breaks. You'll have local shows where people will do local guests and stuff like that. It's mostly news the entire day, unless it's the classical station Apostate Nate pointed to previously. So I don't think there's a single PBS station that's maybe outside of one of the biggest cities in the country. If that even is the case there, that is more than half news. I think it's mostly kids programs, This Old House, and some news. Every time I've listened to NPR, it's playing news unless it's a classical music station, or maybe they have a jazz station or something like that. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. No, I was just wondering. I had to look up, like, in Connecticut, I looked up the local PBS station, and I can honestly say, never watched it. It wouldn't be considered what I would consider. Like, for me, my local stations would be Channel 3, Channel 8, Channel 61. Those would be the ones that I would
Oh,
know
that's a
of.
big
But
jump. 3, 8, 61. Nowhere in between. Just
well, it's
3, 8,
actually Channel
61.
6,
Okay.
but it's actually 3, 8, and 6, but 6 is Channel 61. I don't know. Back when that changed, back when we started getting real cable in there. But yeah, 3, 8, and 61. 61's Fox.
So
3 is
Shannon, as someone who takes the time out of her day each and every day to go into MAGA rooms and troll those conservatives, those MAGA followers, you are not an NPR and PBS elitist. This is something that may not affect you if those stations lose a little bit of money.
no. I've never even, like, they're saying Channel 24 is our local station that does, like, Sesame Street and PBS News, and I've never even heard of it. WEDH in Hartford, Channel 24. Never heard of it. Didn't even know we had it. Couldn't.
Sounds like
Never
money
been on
well
it.
spent to keep that thing going. Well, this is how PBS works. There's like a Simpsons episode where they're watching PBS on the couch, and it's just some like classical Shakespearean, theater that's being shot and put on TV. And Homer's like, boring. And then they have call us now and support your local PBS station. And Marge calls and donates money, and Homer gets pissed off. So it's definitely an acquired taste. This is something maybe people watched growing up and faded away once they stopped watching Sesame Street.
But
Maybe
I
if
was
you don't
never
have
allowed
young
to watch.
kids. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was never allowed to watch Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers for that matter. So,
How
it
did
was
you
kind
grow
of
up, Shannon?
My mother wouldn't let me watch Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street. I watch things like Dungeons and Dragons instead because that's cool. Dungeons and Dragons cartoon and
Well, it's educational. The
Nature
next time
World
you
with
run into a
Captain
dragon,
Mod.
you
Cap-
know how to handle them.
Captain Kangaroo is okay though.
Yeah, well, anyone who's earned a captain rank in the military is okay by me. Okay, so once again, maybe some people had different childhoods. You know, if you had a bunch of young kids running around, I bet you'd be more familiar with your PBS station. If you needed some peace of mind, as we heard from Apostate Nate earlier, maybe you'd be listening to your local classical jazz station or whatever. There are people that use everything. You know, just look at your Netflix. Some people don't watch these things and they only watch these things. So I don't pretend that PBS doesn't have viewers. I don't pretend that NPR across the country doesn't have listeners. But once again, to go back to Reggie, perhaps he said it best: the government shouldn't be funding any news in the United States. I think that's a pretty solid argument. In general, I would not buy that argument. But in the United States, where everything is so partisan and NPR is so slanted to the left and so biased to the left, maybe the government shouldn't be funding any news.
You
I'd
know,
love to
my
hear
mother
from
was
Apostate Nate or
weird.
Reggie. But yeah, Shannon.
They allowed me to watch Rock though, which is Jim Henson, and that was back in the early Fraggle Rock. One of the first
Oh,
shows on
Fraggle
HBO
Rock?
for kids. Yeah, I could watch that though, but not Sesame Street. I don't ever remember
Well, that
watching.
was okay
I mean,
because it wasn't
obviously I know
funded
the
by the
characters,
government.
but yeah, very weird.
So, Shannon, you seem to understand my perspective, but is there any part of you that's like, no, let's not defund TV and radio in the United States?
Um, no, I don't. I agree with Reggie that we shouldn't be funding any sort of uh TV. I mean, I understand the purpose of Sesame Street, and I think that should be funded, but probably not federally. I could understand, especially the reason way back when it
So,
started in the early 70s, especially when there was no other. I mean, you couldn't get stuff on. There was no internet. God, some people didn't have TVs or
hmm.
telephones for that matter in the 70s.
So I believe you've talked about receiving some public benefits related to medical because you've been very open about your. Oh, but by the way, Shannon, I forgot to mention. Great to have you back on the show. Shannon recently had another trip to the hospital, and hopefully all is well. If you want to discuss that, we can totally discuss that at any time. It's completely up to you as always. But you have discussed that in the past, and it's been very interesting, and we wish you well. I believe you've talked about receiving some public medical assistance in the past. Let me know if that's incorrect. But whatever the case, I assume you do support medical assistance in the United States, or we definitely have talked about food stamps. You do support food stamps. What's the difference between federal dollars going for food stamps, going for medical assistance versus going for news or other contents that Americans can theoretically enjoy?
Well, medical isn't theoretical. Medical will save your child's life, where depending on what they're broadcasting may help, but it's not proven. Medical assistance could be anything from a broken
So
arm. You get a
I do
set
buy the
correctly.
argument that penicillin is more important than Sesame Street. So that's your argument, is that it's just about necessity versus having something?
Yes. I mean, obviously we have enough money to fund both, but our military is much more important. So we don't.
And generally, we have lower taxes than a lot of the world. And so, even though we do
Absolutely.
have a lot of money, we don't have as much money as look at this country or that country. Okay, so I buy that. That's what I probably would have said. Aside from all the bias arguments and maybe the government shouldn't fund news, giving someone Medicaid coverage, giving children healthcare coverage, giving someone who's hungry some sort of food stamp program. I think that's more essential. So that's an argument I am open to. Reggie, you're joining us now. You tweeted earlier that the government shouldn't be funding any news. Tell me more.
So basically, what I'm saying is, I know you were saying BBC and all that it's okay for them. I think as soon as the government starts laying money into any kind of news, over time the news station will want to get bigger and expand, but it becomes a slippery slope when the government goes, well, we don't like what you're saying. Now we're going to start taking away your money. Now you're too big to fucking take care of yourself. Sorry about that. Now you're too big to take care of yourself. And you need
I mean, are you generally familiar with the BBC? I don't think the BBC is so big that it runs its own will. I mean, they're still under the will of directives, and the BBC has had,
I'm giving an example.
cutbacks and things like that. So this is a theoretical example. Can you give me any real life example where that's happened in a developed country?
No, I cannot. Offhand, no, I cannot.
So then if we don't have a real life example, as opposed to taking away people's guns, like there are real life historical examples where like the Nazis did that, right? I don't know if that's something that's going to convince me that taking away guns is a bad idea, just objectively versus specifically in the United States. But at least those examples do exist. If you don't have guns, it's hard to have a revolution. If we can't think of a specific, this state financed media entity got so big it couldn't be stopped, is that a danger?
Well, no, I'm not saying that it couldn't be stopped. I'm saying if they're saying, okay, we're going to give you money, but over time they're not able to support themselves at that point. They need the government to help support them. And now the government's saying, now you we're going to say this, or we don't like that, so we're going to take away your money. That's just, like I said, like you said, it's a theoretical thing because I can't come up with anything off the top of my head.
Aside from the news aspect, where clearly this is more about something related to news, you could say that about Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. Like, we don't like the way you're doing this, so we're going to take away your money. That's just a sort of anti-government funding ideal in general, as well as specifically for something like news, right?
I mean, it could be. I'm sorry, at the moment I'm also doing something else, so.
No worries. Yeah, I know, Reggie, that sometimes you're not able to throw into the show. It's always great to have you. Please continue.
Oh, that was pretty much it. I was just expanding on my original comment.
All right, well, stay with us. If you have to do something else, don't feel bad. It's always great to have you, but I think Shannon might have a point she wants to bring up. Yes, Shannon?
Sorry, Lee, I'm giving my dog water, so that's what you're hearing in the background. But my fear would be giving money to news outlets would become more state-sponsored news ships like Russia or China. Not that it is now, but because I don't think PBS is, or NPR for that matter, but that's where it could go, or at least that's where I could see it going.
Yeah, that's certainly a slippery slope. But let's talk about how I agree with you. It's not that. So when I say NPR is biased, it's slanted, and I don't want the federal government to support it, I do not pretend that it's the same thing as, is it RT, the Russian thing, or something out of China, or something out of Iran. That's completely different. NPR chooses to ignore stories of value. It chooses to overplay stories that may have some value, but are not valuable to a lot of people who are hearing them. There's way more valuable information that they can give out than the stuff they choose to report and focus on, which is the propagandized liberal bias that I've been discussing. I feel like that's objective. We all have agreed thus far that that seems to be the case. if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal person and you don't think NPR is biased, you're either uninformed or you're a liar. That I'll believe that to my dying day. But that's not the same thing as North Korean TV. That's not the same thing as some radio station that's funded by the government in Russia. They can do whatever they want. They can get rid of their bias at any time at NPR. They just won't, because that's how it works there. Now, to be fair,
Right.
that's how it works at most places. So they have a lot of friends in the United States with the liberal bias, but they have complete control in theory and I think in reality of what they report. So I agree with you. It's not state TV, it's not state radio in that way.
Right. I was just saying it could become a slippery slope. If great, it's on the left side now, but if we did fund it, what's stopping them from stopping all left funding and making it all right? But just stop it all, and then that doesn't happen.
Do you think that would happen with NPR and PBS? I think they've remained pretty
I don't think
independent.
Right. I don't think NPR and PBS would do it, but that doesn't stop them from opening a new one and saying this is the new PBS or the new,
Oh,
whatever.
okay. So this is a really
That's what I
cool
meant.
argument. If I understand this, Shannon, you're saying that we should not have federal dollars for news programs because then Trump can just create Trump news and pay for it with the government.
Correct. Yes.
Hey, look at that. That's a pretty good argument. Apostate Nate, I'd love to hear what you think about that, because Apostate Nate tweeted earlier, NPR is clearly slanted. Its presentation could be more objective, and it isn't. I think that is a great description of NPR. It's clearly slanted. It could be more objective, but it's not. That's a choice. That's a daily choice, and it's been that way for a very long time. He asks, is the solution to defund? Not sure. That is also a great question to ask. How do we fix this? Well, if you defund it federally, you can argue that fixes it because they can do whatever they want, because any news organization in theory can do whatever it wants. But if you're thinking about the value of NPR as a public entity and the value of PBS as a public entity, and even though I think they're biased, I think there is value there, absolutely. You might lose that if they're not receiving even a small amounts of federal funding for the overall parents, like headquarters in DC or New York, and then member stations like we read in, was it Charlotte, that received $145,000 grants. That's clearly a lot more than 99% of NPR affiliates around the country are receiving. But for the ones that do receive those grants, maybe that sets them up for the next 25 years. Maybe that keeps them afloat for the next 40. I'm just throwing out numbers, right? So if you remove that, the value to the public does go away. NPR does report objective, real news, but there's a lot of crap in there as well. That's not made up. I'm not saying NPR makes up stuff. They choose what to report. They over-report it. And the way they report it, I don't think is genuine and objective. But it's still news, it's still true, and even slanted liberal news is valuable. If something happens in the world and all I have is MSNBC, I hope to God I didn't eat recently, because then I would be throwing up all over the TV. But even then, as I smear the throw up off of the TV, I will receive real factual news from MSNBC about whatever is happening in the world. I'll just have to try to get through the bias and unpleasantness that it is to watch MSNBC as someone who sees a bias in nearly everything that they do. And I would say the same thing about NPR. Reggie, you're with us. Shannon, you're with us. Apostate Native, you can jump over. I'd love to hear more of your story. It was very interesting, but I know it might be a bit difficult for you right now. Let's jump to the source. Let's jump over my constant co-host, President Donald Trump. Great to have you on the show as always. Mr. President, you are trying to defund NPR and public broadcasting, PBS. Why are you doing that?
Defunding is a big league move, folks, and I'm making it happen. Look, these organizations, they're not doing a good job. They're biased. They're fake news. And we can't be funding them with our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. It's just not right, believe me.
So, Mr. President, you say it's not right, but what about the people who watch PBS or the people who listen to NPR? Won't that go away if we take away federal funding?
The people who watch PBS or listen to NPR, they're going to be just fine. They'll find other ways to get their news and entertainment. And let me tell you, it's going to be better. It's going to be tremendous because we're going to make sure that the best, the greatest, the most fantastic content is out there. And it's not going to be funded by the government. It's going to be funded by people who know how to make a deal, like me.
Why is it important for the government to not fund news like NPR or PBS?
The government has no business funding news outlets. It's a total disaster, a complete failure, because when you have government funded news, you have fake news, you have propaganda, and we can't have that in this country. We need news that's fair, news that's balanced, and news that's not beholden to the government.
A moment ago, Mr. President, you said you needed people who knew how to make a deal running the news, and you said people like you. Are you going to start your own news organization?
I've built empires, I've created amazing brands, and I know more about great news than any expert. And let me tell you, my news organization, if I decide to start one, will be huge, just huge. And it'll be so good, so strong, so powerful that it'll make all the other news organizations look like failures.
Yeah, Shannon, did you catch that slip of the tongue? He's like, we need people who know how to make a deal like me to run the news.
Right. I did. Yeah, right.
You know what? I think I
No, that
would
I mean
I
that's what
think
I'm
I would
scared of is
watch
that
Donald Trump as an anchor reporting the news. That would be fascinating. Like reading the news, throwing in his own comments.
I don't think he could get away from himself. He could be reporting on a baseball team and he'd be like, well, in my day, I was the best baseball player ever, and just go off on his tangent instead of reporting the news.
Look at that Billy over there just struck out. He's not a winner.
Exactly. He should be an announcer for a baseball team. That he can do that.
Yeah, I don't. I'm worried about asking him. Sometimes when I ask this AI Donald Trump to do something, and I don't know if he can do it or if it's just he doesn't want to. He'll be like, "Yeah, no, I'm not wasting my time doing that." So I feel like, but yeah, that would be a great use of AI to have like great sports moments or more moments in news, moments in history narrated by Donald Trump, like the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, or like Tiananmen Square, or the fall of the Berlin Wall, or like that moment when the Red Sox were going to win the World Series, but I think someone hits it down the first or third base line and the person misses it and they lose the game. Like just to
That
have
was the
those
third baseline.
narrated,
Yeah.
yeah, by Donald Trump would be fascinating.
That's what he's gonna have in his presidential library.
Who needs PBS when you can just watch Donald Trump narrate the history? Oh my gosh, that's my okay. I'm getting ready to news debate, everybody. Now, Trump narrates history will be my new project. Just
It's like
select
a cross.
moments.
It's like a cross between regular history and drunk history. We just have Donald Trump history. Did you ever see the
Oh,
TV
Donald
show Drunk
Trump
History?
drunk history would be too much. I feel like that we're not ready for that as humanity. We can only just take stones. So plus he doesn't drink.
There's always a first time.
I'm sure he has. I'm sure he has drank. I think that was probably a choice he made. I doubt that Donald Trump has gone through his entire life banging porn stars and ripping people off and not gotten drunk. But at least apparently it's real.
Can we just give
that
him an
he
edible
does
and
not
let him
drink.
report the news? Can we give him an edible and let him report the news?
Donald Trump through history on edibles. That'll be the secondary YouTube channel. That'll come in a moment. Yeah, I don't think I can ask him this. It's limited features. That's a work in progress. Okay, so we've been going an hour and a half. I'm happy to go another 2 hours. I think that's, or rather, another half an hour to 2 hours. That's kind of the sweet spot for the show. But we need more hot takes. My hot take: Macron's wife beats him, and the world doesn't care. Also, I forget who brought this up. I may have brought this up. Whoever does have the credit for this, thank you, because this was my other hot take. Wanted to talk about the defunding of NPR and PBS for some time now. I might have some other ones lined up here, some ones I've been paying attention to. There's yet another gigantic plane crash. This time, one person survived. The Washington Post texted 1,000 Americans about the LA protests, and they asked them what they thought, so we could talk about that. We haven't addressed the LA protests yet on the show, really. ABC
Or we could talk about
News
the protest
has
scheduled for. Sorry, Lee, we could talk about the protest scheduled for tomorrow with Trump's military parade.
that's his birthday and the military parade, right? Yeah, so that's on the docket. We can talk about that. ABC News has suspended and perhaps even fired a journalist for tweeting that Trump is a world-class hater. That's a story we haven't gotten to. Oh, did everyone know Trump has been renaming military bases to their previous names that honored like Confederate generals, but he's doing it in a way that is technically not doing it. It's very interesting. He also renamed a Navy ship that was named after San Francisco mayor, gay rights advocate, and assassinee, someone who assassinated. I'm not sure what that's called. It was the USS Harvey Milk, and it's not anymore. Those are some stories that I have selected. But Shannon or Reggie, what are you guys thinking? Looks like we lost Apostate Nate.
No, I see Apostate Nate back as a speaker, but
Oh,
Reggie's gone.
sorry, we lost Reggie. Yes, well, Apostate Nate is with us. Apostate Nate, you haven't had a chance to throw in a topic. Give us a topic, but also if you have anything else to add about NPR, thank you for sharing your NPR story earlier.
Yeah, Lee, I wish I did have something more to add about NPR. I feel like I don't know enough about how those programs, how those stations, how that funding works to really get into the weeds. I just hope that my classical music doesn't go away. And again, there are other ways I can get that. There's just something that strikes me as comforting, knowing that any time of day I can turn on that station and I'm either going to hear classical music or several times a year them begging for money. And it's interesting you brought up, switching gears briefly here, the Trump renaming the bases and things like
Really
that.
quickly, let's jump to that, but I want to add there's nothing quite like listening to the radio. When you listen to the radio, for me, it feels more real. It's more exciting. I can't describe it other than that. My words are failing me. But in the car, or even if I don't think I have a radio anywhere at home, like wherever you listen to the radio, there's something magical. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. Surreal about listening to radio, even if it's not live, even if it's something that has been recorded and there's putting up music, or it's just like I know they like will record people and put them on the air and they'll pretend that they're live. Whatever the case, there's some value there. So I completely agree with you. Before we jump somewhere else, Apostate Nate, will you give us your opinion? Reggie tweeted the government shouldn't be funding any news. Your response to that?
I think there's merit to that point because governments change, their leaderships change, their values change, the parties change. Over decades, centuries, parties can even flip. You're never going to get a static set of values or ideas coming out of your government. And governments are, in the end, populated by people who, in the end, are somewhat controlled, guided by their own biases. Uh, I think it's a good case, Lee. I don't know if I want to see my public options disappear, but I really can't disagree with Reggie very much there.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a hard thing as an American. For better or for worse, we have this freedom of speech and we have this separation of government. That's not always the case other places. It's hard to argue with the idea that the government shouldn't fund news. Would anyone disagree with the idea that the government can fund children's programming or something like This Old House? Is that something the government can fund? I'm fine with that. We're getting
I
100
could see,
from
well, I could
Apostate
see where
Nate. Shannon?
I could see where bias could come in for child's programming, but This Old House, I don't know how you could do that as bias either way.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. You could have, and this is the problem with Sesame Street. I think they have like characters that say things that sometimes parents don't like, or the characters are themselves something that the parents don't like. But yes, with This Old House or like some show about cooking, it's hard to imagine. Before you go out to the protests in LA, let's make sure your kids have a nice, authentic Italian supper. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen on some sort of PBS cooking show. Okay, so I think that's the final note on that is that I want the government to fund some sort of content for Americans, but with the bias at NPR and less bias at PBS because there's just less news there, perhaps that's just a nice thing we can't have in this country. Apostate Nate, back to you. I apologize. You were going to go in a different direction, and I want to say hi to Better Call Saul. Sorry, Better Call Sal. Forgot how to pronounce that. Haven't seen you in a while. Great to have you here on the show. Request to speak. Back to you, Apostate Nate. You were talking about renaming bases.
Yeah, to me, that's the same level of petty. At this point, I think that Trump is taking to places, otherwise. For example, I think my hot take for the daily, and I can't imagine why this would be controversial, is that the name of the mountain, Lee, is Denali, and it was called that long before the colonizers got there. That's my hot take, Lee.
So I don't know specifically about that. What did people think that was someone's last name, but it was actually like an Indian word? I just don't know the history.
It's what the indigenous called Denali before the colonizers got there and decided they were going to name it after a U.S. presidential candidate. I just think it's just such an off. Like if you go somewhere, especially as grand as a mountain, one of the tallest peak in North America, and it already has a name. Why wouldn't you just find out what it has been called? Normally, things that
I think a lot of the times that is the case. I mean, it's not hard to go around the United States and find Native American names for things. Does it happen every time? Clearly not. But I generally that happens a lot, right?
I would think so. And Trump officially designating Denali again as McKinley. I just think that's disgusting. I just think that's
Oh,
like
okay.
really.
So McKinley versus Denali. Okay. That was once again, I wasn't getting some of these references. That's my fault. I'm just not a mountain person, I guess.
No, I should
So,
have been more. I should have been more clearly, but yeah,
no, that's totally fine.
yeah.
I will own that. That's my bad. I just want to bring this up from the New York Times. If anyone is not aware of what's going on here, this is the genius of the Trump administration. Every once in a while, they hit it out of the park with what they're doing. And I'm not talking about my endorsement of it, but the way they do it. This is why Republicans win. No Democrat would ever think of doing this. This is the problem with the Democratic Party. This is why I could never vote for Bernie Sanders as president of the United States, why we will never have a liberal Trump. We will never even have a liberal JD Vance. I mean, people on the left just are not adventurous and they're not willing to push the envelope. Check this out. This is from the New York Times. This is genius. President Trump, during a speech at Fort Bragg, said Tuesday he would restore the names of all Army bases that were named for Confederate generals, but were ordered changed by Congress in the waning days of Trump's first administration. His move skirts the law mandating the removal of Confederate symbols from the military, through the same maneuver used to restore the name of Fort Bragg, which briefly was renamed Fort Liberty. In a statement, the Army says it will take no immediate action to restore the old names of bases originally honoring Confederates, but the bases' names would instead honor other American soldiers with similar names and initials. For example, Fort Eisenhower in Georgia, honoring President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who led the D-Day landings during World War II, would revert to the name Fort Gordon, which once honored John Brown Gordon, the Confederate slave owner and suspected Ku Klux Klan member. However, the Army says the base would instead honor Master Sergeant Gary Gordon, who fought in the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia. So, we're not naming this the Robert E. Lee military base. This is the Lee News Debate base. Isn't that amazing? I got to say, I don't like this. I'm not for this. But if you're going to do it and just tell everyone to F off, what an amazing way to do so. People, reactions, am I overblowing this? I think this is genius.
No, I put all 7 up there that are being renamed and all the people he's renaming them after down below in the
Let me
CNBC
grab
News
that.
article.
Thank you.
Yeah, it says the same thing, like who they're naming them after, even though they're the same name of the
And Lee,
Confederate.
while you're familiarizing yourself with that, I want to go on the record as saying that I know there's at least one news debate recorded space where I have said that if Trump wins again, at the very least, it will be entertaining.
Yeah, certainly has been interesting. Oh,
We got
CBS
the Gulf
News
of
is now.
America, though. We got
We
the
got the
Gulf
what?
of
What?
America.
Oh, the
Gulf of
Gulf of
America.
America. Yeah, it's been renamed for America. Let me see if I can get this to work. CBS.
Better Call Saul might not have the Gulf of America, but we have the Gulf of America.
Yeah, that's right. Not sure what they call that in Ireland. Probably still the Gulf of Mexico. Might not be able to get this up. The ad block doesn't work. Damn you, ad block. Damn you, CBS News. But yes, there's a long list. So they unnamed the USS Harvey Milk. I don't think it was called the USS Milk. I hope it was called the USS Milk. That's a really interesting name for a naval ship. But I think it was the Harvey Milk. And I got to be honest, you know, a gay rights icon, gay rights advocate, gay man himself, someone who was assassinated as the mayor of San Francisco, if I remember correctly. Um, I don't want to take anything away from his legacy and his accomplishments, but that's not on my short list of what we name naval craft after. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think we should name a Navy ship after MLK Jr. I don't think we should name this, that, or the other. Maybe presidents and soldiers, like that makes the most sense. So I can understand if someone was, without hating who Harvey Milk was as a person or the things he advocated for, how someone could say, was that the right decision? But if I was president, I wouldn't rename it. I wouldn't unname it the USS Harvey Milk. Maybe I just would make sure that under my White House, we were naming military things after military people or politicians at the very least.
But
I
he
think
did.
makes the most sense.
But he did serve in the military. Harvey Milk did
But
serve
was
in the
he?
military.
Yeah. But was he awarded in the military for his bravery? I don't think so. Just because you served in the military doesn't
That's
give you the
true.
right to have something named after you. Now, I didn't know that, so that makes a little bit more sense. But was he in the
But he was
Navy? Let's
kicked
look
out.
this up.
Yeah, he was a rescue diver on a sub during the Korean War. But he was other than honorably discharged for being gay. And he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously in 2009.
Okay, well, I'm starting to change. Let me jump over here to ChatGPT. I'm starting to change my tone on this. So Yes, Harvey Milk served in the U.S. Navy. He was a lieutenant junior grade and worked as a diving officer aboard the USS Kitiwaki. Butchering that. He served during the Korean War era, but was not in active combat. No, sorry. I would say no. He was honorably discharged. So honorably, so not dishonorably. So he still got an honorable
No, I
discharge,
have it as
reportedly
other
under.
than I have it as other than honorably. He was discharged as. Other than
Oh,
honorably just means you're not dishonorably discharged. It's just you're not honorably discharged either. My dad's friend got other than honorably discharged when he arrested a colonel for being drunk, and he was an MP and got an other than honorably discharged because he hit him. But it's kind of weird.
let me try to find the exact information on that. But whatever the case, ChatGPT reportedly he was. This is what it says: honorably discharged in 1955 under circumstances related to his homosexuality, though the official record did not state that. But I'm sure that it could have been the case and it wasn't stated. Maybe there's some more documents somewhere that talks about that. Let me see if I can find. Okay, this is from the Bay Area Reporter. That looks like a real website. No, I don't want to sign up for your emails. Thank you.
Have a heart, Lee. That's how they make their money.
Yeah, given an other than so Chat GPT, yeah, have a heart lead. They're not going to get federal funding anymore if it's an NPR member station. Other than honorable, according to the Bay Area Dispatch, Bay Area Reporter, from the U.S. Navy and forced to resign rather than face a court martial because of his homosexuality. This is naval records obtained by the Bay Area reporter that confirm that that's what it was. So, okay, ChatGPT, wrong with the details here.
And I put what in other than honorably discharges down below.
Let me find that. Yeah.
It's just a screenshot, so you could.
Considered a bad paper discharge less severe than dishonorable or bad conduct, but still impacting eligibility for some veteran benefits. Okay, so clearly this is something I was not aware of. I will own that, did not know this, and so this gives me some more context. But for someone who did not serve in combat, I'm going to go ahead and say if you were not awarded something for your military service, like you didn't save someone who was drowning, or you weren't killed in some accidents, something like that. Sure, okay, he was kicked out of the military because he was gay. I assume that happened to a lot of people. In fact, right now they're trying to get trans military members to resign, or maybe it passed. They were trying to offer them a huge payout, basically like getting some sort of really nice payout from your job when you get laid off, but you have to agree to it. But just doing that, I'm not sure that that's enough to have a ship named after you. Maybe that's the case. Maybe there have been people who are just kind of normal people who got ships named after them. But Harvey Milk is not known as a U.S. Navy veteran. I know who Harvey Milk is, at least the main part of the story from the movie, and like a little bit after that. I didn't know he was a Navy veteran. So I'll own that, but I don't think it's really common knowledge. Also, the fact that he was other than discharged in 1955, and that was related to his homosexuality. Didn't know that as well. It's not surprising, but didn't know that. What I know him for is being the mayor of San Francisco who was assassinated, and being a gay rights advocate and that sort of a thing. And if that's what you're known for, I don't think being named after a naval vessel is the right choice. It makes sense. It's a naval vessel rather than a military base because he was or an army base, I should say, because he was in the Navy. But I just don't, I
I
don't.
was actually reading how they're named, like how Navy vessels are named. And I guess it's under the direction of the Secretary of the Navy and under the direction of the President, according to the following rules. Sailing vessels of first class shall be named after states of the Union, those of second class after rivers, those of third class after principal cities and towns, and then of fourth class, the President may direct anything, any name.
So ChatGPT had that discharge detail incorrect, but let's see what they say about this. A U.S. Navy ship was named after Harvey Milk, the USNS Harvey Milk, because of his legacy as both a Navy veteran and civil rights leader. I don't think it had anything to do with him being a veteran. I think it made it maybe easier to connect the dots, but I don't buy that for a second. It was because he was a civil rights leader.
Yeah, I
Milk
was trying to see if
served.
there was any other I was trying to see if there was any other ships, like even if they're named after president. Well, I suppose a president would still be, even if they don't have
I'm okay
military
with
service, they're
politicians.
still.
I'm okay with states.
Well,
The
he is a
Arizona
politician, though.
was bombed in the Pearl Harbor, right? Sorry, I would say like presidential politicians or maybe like senators. Like, how many mayors are there? I don't think a mayor is important enough. Once again, he was an important mayor, civil rights, gay rights advocate leader who was assassinated. I don't buy it. These are the things that happen that I don't think are important battles, and then they just piss off the right more than they gratify the left. I guess that's the way I would leave it. I just don't buy it. But naming the ship after him was a deliberate act of inclusion. See, that's what I'm saying is I don't think that made sense. It was meant to acknowledge a historic mistreatment of, yes, I understand, recognize the contribution of service members. The decision was part of a broader effort by the Navy to diversify the names of its fleet. See, it's DEI, and reflect more of America's social history, not just its military one. See, but the military is the military. If it's a president, if it's a congressman, like for instance McCain, who was shot down and was a POW, he was never president. So if the rule is we only just say, for example, the rules we only name presidents for ship or only name ships after presidents or military men. Well, McCain's a military guy. He could have got it just for that. And he was almost president. So I mean, like, that's fine. A mayor, someone who didn't have
Well,
a
like this one,
distinguished naval career.
like there's a USS Henry Jackson, and that's named after a senator from Rhode Island, and he has no military service. He was a strong supporter of the military, but he's just a Democratic senator from Rhode Island. So I don't know how they really figure
I
out.
would say a senator is more important than a mayor.
Oh, yes, absolutely. A senator is more important than a mayor, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
someone who is a strong military advocate. I mean, I assume Harvey Milk, after he was kicked out, even if it was an other discharge because of being gay, he was not super pro-military. I could be wrong. I'm guessing he was like, the military has a lot of problems. He was probably not advocating for more military funding. I don't know how a mayor would do that, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that was the only one I could come up with that was named after someone that didn't have military service. That was the only other one
Let
that I
me
could find.
let me ask you guys about this. So if you're in charge and someone says the idea has come up to name a ship after Harvey Milk, do you say yay or nay? I say nay.
Not with that. Yeah, I don't see. I don't see. I don't know. I'm with you. I think that the ship should be named either after heroes that have been awarded for their bravery, or yeah, I mean, like McCain. That would make sense to me. McCain would
Or
make
even
sense.
people who just died. If there's some naval vessel that's named after a World War II American, Navy guy. I don't know what our naval casualties were during let's say World War II. We had plenty that I'm aware of. Just some guy from Missouri, and they have a new battleship, and he fought in some naval battle and was killed. Like that makes sense to me. Not just someone who
Right.
served in the military and was a mayor. Harvey Milk is a great individual that I think deserves to be looked up to. I think his story is really important. Despite all the things I said about NPR and PBS, I'm usually I can't think of a single time someone was reporting on Harvey Milk and I was like, oh, that's that's biased. He has an amazing story. From what mostly the movie, I'm going to be honest. But if they named something, if the mayor's office was the Harvey Milk building in San Francisco, I'm totally for that. I hope there are
Yeah,
things
I was
named
gonna
after
say
him.
something like, yeah, I was gonna say like a park or a school or a highway or a, all the other stuff we
Harvey
need.
Milk Gun Act, that sort of a
Just like
thing.
that.
Harvey
Right.
Milk Equal Rights Act, something like that. That makes more sense, right? Isn't that more on the nose?
Are you saying a battleship should be named after my grandfather because he was injured in World War II fighting in the Solomon
Yeah,
Islands against the
injured.
Japanese?
Did he fight bravely? Like, was there something that he was recognized for? I guess if you survive, that's a good one too. Shannon, you're muted. Did your grandfather do something cool? Oh, Elon Musk is taking out his revenge on Shannon. Apostate, you're with us. You're a speaker. What do you think about this? If you had the decision and someone's like, we have this idea to name a naval ship after a naval veteran. Harvey Milk is a naval veteran. He was not dishonorably discharged. So I think he passes that test. And especially, even if he had been dishonorably discharged, it appears that the documents point to only his homosexuality as opposed to other conducts like he was lazy or something like that, right? So we can just forget the discharge and just for a moment, hypothetically, he served and just left the Navy like everyone else does most of the time, unless you become a career officer or something. Would you name a ship after him?
No. You have so many more people than ships in the military that once you start naming ships, even bases, anything, I think you can find someone who paid the ultimate price and use a name designation. I would not want anything named, for the most part. I'm sure that we can think of some exceptions, but for the most part, I think you need to be a fallen soldier to get a namesake on a ship, for me.
Or someone who survived but showed bravery and by all rights should be dead but somehow survived.
No, I agree with that. I think, for example, something named after John McCain would be appropriate.
I think they did name something after him. Don't quote me on that, but I thought I read that somewhere after he died. He got something named after him, and if he hasn't, I hope he does. I think John McCain was a great American. I think that maybe he chose the wrong party. Um, I think he would have been a little bit maybe more successful as a Democrat, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I just once again, not everything has to be for everyone. So ChatGPT says, and it could be wrong, the decision was part of a broader effort by the Navy to diversify the names of its fleet and reflect more of America's social history, not just its military one. I think that's actually the opposite of what the military should be doing. I want the military to celebrate military individuals or, okay, presidents, states, town names, maybe. Um, you know whatever the precedent is. I don't think this is the precedent. I think this was a new precedent they were trying to set. And so when Trump renames it, this is not what I would do. Once it was set in stone, I think it's disrespectful to someone who accomplished a lot and is important and should be remembered for the rest of American history. I absolutely believe that. So I don't want to take away from that at all. But while I would not have named a ship after Harvey Milk, once it's been named, to undo that, I think it's where it is disrespectful once it's already been thrown out there. Now, if we sidestep to renaming bases or ships for Confederate generals, but then you find someone who actually deserves that credit, who shares the last name, that's a dick move. But at least, you're finding someone who I think no one has attacked the idea that these new people whose last name is Lee or whose last name is Bragg and they are replacing the previous names of Confederate generals. I don't think anyone is debating that these people don't deserve that honor. It's just a dick move. And they would not have been honored had it not been for Trump's desire to bring back that Confederate name. So I wouldn't be doing this either, to talk on both sides of the coin, Democrats and Republicans. I wouldn't do this, and I wouldn't unname a ship Harvey Milk. That being said, if they are renaming these bases with the same name, but for someone who actually deserves it, in theory, I guess that's okay. And this is a power the president apparently has. They're not able to stop this. So I guess in theory, this is fine, but it's a dumb move. I think it's a disrespectful move because, once again, if they have to rename it back to what it was previously for however many years, it has been the new name. It costs money to change that. And then the new person who's being honored, it's the same thing with Harvey Milk. Perhaps they're not as iconic as Harvey Milk in American history, but whatever the case, their name was being honored. So it is completely disrespectful to dishonor them by removing that award, by removing that honor, right? So in theory, if they just had a Confederate named base and they said, well, it's no longer the Robert E. Lee base and now it's the Lee News Debate base, okay, they found a loophole. As long as the new person they're naming it after deserves this honor, which I believe all of the people they've chosen clearly do, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, that would have been an okay solution for me. But since they were renamed and there was a third interim name that's now gone and they're going back to the first name, but it's technically a different name, that's a dick move, and I don't support that. If they had just moved to that from the very get-go, I think that actually would have been an acceptable solution. Shannon is back with us. Let's see if Twitter Spaces cooperates. I'm going to make you a speaker again. What do you think about that, Apostate Nate? Do you agree with everything I just said? Does that make sense? Would you accept we can't call this the Robert E. Lee base anymore, but now it's the James Lee base? Is that fine? Oh, we
Sorry
lost
about that,
Apostate
Lee. I
Nate. No, I
dropped
was
out.
just a listener. That's fine. You're back, Shannon. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
So
I'm
clearly,
sorry about that. But the other ones that were named as Milk, did you see those yet? Because there were like 5 that were renamed, or that are going
there
to
are
be named
5
after the.
ships.
Yeah, I guess like
I saw
Ginsburg was
just
one.
one here from ChatGPT. Oh, the
Right, they're building
Ginsburg, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. No, that's
Ginsburg,
inappropriate. She was a Supreme
and
Court
then
justice.
right, and then Harriet Tubman is the other one that they're
Oh,
considering.
no, that's
So these
totally
are
inappropriate. She definitely did not serve in the Navy or the military. No.
Ginsburg or Tubman.
I
Or
don't
both.
think Tubman did, unless I'm really wrong, and I don't think Ginsburg did
She
either. But
didn't serve in the Navy, no, but she was what, George Washington's spy, right? She was the one.
Harriet.
She
Oh,
was-
I'm sorry. I was way off. I thought I heard Harriet Tubman and I thought a different person. So Harriet Tubman, if she was a spy, that one makes a little bit more sense. So let me ask ChatGPT about
I'm sorry,
this.
that was during the Civil War, not the Revolutionary War. She was for Lincoln. She was a spy for the
Oh, okay, yeah, you said George
American Civil War.
Washington. Okay,
I
so I
said
was
George
thinking
Washington.
a
So.
different time, but still, I didn't realize she was a spy. I was thinking of something else. So,
Yeah.
is anything named after
Those two are being built. The Tubman and the
Harriet Tubman?
and Ginsburg are the two that are being built right now that they're also thinking of renaming. But there was a
Okay, so
previous one that
parks
was built.
and one second here, even a U.S. Navy ship. So I don't know about a Navy ship, but then again, if she didn't serve, it's hard to decide what to name it after. But from what you've just said, I'm sort of okay with it. The USS Harriet Tubman is a future U.S. Navy Expeditionary Sea Base. Oh, it's a base. Okay.
And my last name is Bragg. Are you saying that the base is named after me or my ex-husband?
Yes, the Shannon Bragg. There it is. Okay, so it says, like Harvey Milk, this is meant to honor her service. She was a Union spy, nurse, and scout during the Civil War. You know what? I totally take it back. I didn't remember this when you said Harriet Tubman. I thought of something else. Wasn't she involved in the Underground Railroad, or am I making that up?
No, she was involved in the Underground Railroad, absolutely.
Okay, so I thought Underground Railroad, which you could argue was something that was happening at the time and could be considered just as good. We could have that discussion. But if she was a spy and a nurse and a scout during the Civil War, then absolutely, I would call her a veteran, and she is able to be named whatever. I wouldn't think Navy. That seems a bit strange, but whatever. That's fine. I will recant. I thought it was the Underground Railroad, and we could argue whether or not that makes sense. But a Union spy, nurse, and scout during the Civil War, abso-effing-lutely.
But Ginsburg, I agree with you as well. She didn't serve in the military. She didn't.
And yeah, and if there's no precedent for having a Supreme Court justice being named for anything, I would say, why start that?
I'll check that out if there's any others. Ships named after SCOTUS.
Yeah, let me know. If there is, then I'm not against it because it's the precedent. I would question the choice of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I feel like that's a political thing versus I feel like there's a lot more men that you could choose from on the Supreme Court, as that's usually the case.
They're saying it's because they fought for civil and human rights for people like John Lewis, Robert F. Kennedy, and Thurgood Marshall. That's why they're putting Ginsburg on the ship as well, because John Lewis, R. F. Kennedy, and Thurgood Marshall all had ships names after them. But they weren't. Was Thurgood
Yeah,
Marshall
I mean,
SCOTUS? Yeah, he was a SCOTUS, but the others weren't.
did he have anything else in his background, or was he just a judge and stuff?
Oh, probably. He was born in 1908. I would assume he served sometime. Most of the men back then did. That's before my time, before your time, before all our times, probably.
Don't judge me, Shannon Bragg. Don't judge me.
No,
Thurgood Marshall did
serve.
not
Did not
serve in the military. So why
Yep.
is there a military ship named after him? The USNS Thurgood Marshall is a Watson-class vehicle cargo ship in the U.S. Navy's Military Sealift Command. It's named after him not because of military service, but because of his impact on American justice and civil rights. When was that happening? Oh, this happened in
He served
2022.
67 to, he served
Yeah, so that's
on the SCOTUS
not
from
precedent.
67 to 91.
Say it again.
He served on SCOTUS from 67 to 91.
Yeah, but it happened in 2022. So
yeah.
this is a new thing. This is not precedent. This is something new. This is talking about the Navy being more inclusive and having social history, which I'm against. If this happened back in this, in the 90s or the 80s or something, it would be a different argument. But no, I'm against this. You should be a veteran at the very least. Harvey Milk certainly qualifies for that. But I think that if you're a veteran, you should have had valor or bravery or some sort of death that's recognized, as opposed to just being a veteran, meaning you served in the military. Harvey Milk was not a combat veteran. I would say probably let's focus on the combat veterans. There's so many of them who aren't honored in this way. I think it doesn't make sense to move out of that. And then if we go with states or city names or rivers or something like that, I feel like that's tried and true, and they've been doing that for a long time. I think there's like a USS Shenandoah or something like that. That's not, I don't think, someone's last name that they're honoring. I think that's
a river, though, right? That's
exactly.
right.
So my point
Yeah,
is if we have rivers or geographic areas or states or cities, that I think we've been doing that for a long time. I have no problem with that. But if that extends to presidents and a senator here and there that may or may not have served, like a McCain who did, versus the one we mentioned previously did not, but was a supporter of the military, I guess. But I still don't like just the supporter of the military. So I guess I would be against that as well. But no, I was wrong about Harry Tubman. When you said that, I was like, oh, Underground Railroad, and then you mentioned George Washington. So I was like, oh, I was way wrong. But I was wrong no matter what. I did not remember. I'm sure I learned this at some point. She was a Union spy, a nurse, and a scout, and absolutely, that's a veteran. And if she is chosen to be recognized, I think that's a pretty good choice.
Yeah, kind of. I was just looking up because they mentioned RFK, not Junior, RFK as well, and he was only a Navy reserveman that got selected for a college training program at Harvard. So even him's not. I mean, his brother JFK,
Oh,
absolutely.
sorry. Press the wrong button there. Vika. Okay, so RFK was a presidential candidate who was assassinated. He also
That's true.
served as the what's the Merrick Garland position? He was the what's
Attorney
the
General.
he was the attorney
Was it
general, right under his brother.
right? Yeah, I think he was Attorney General, right?
And you said he was Naval Reserve. Okay, so his military career is not one that qualifies him. But if you're
Right.
an assassinated presidential candidate, I think that's different than a mayor who was assassinated. So I don't like the RFK naming. That's not one that I would choose, but I think that makes some sense. He was almost president, arguably.
Right. Yeah, I was just looking up the other ones, because we were. But yeah,
And
I
was
mean,
the attorney general. But then again, I was against Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But then again, she didn't serve. So there's no right answer here. It's all perspectives and weighing it and stuff like that. But no, I mean, I don't know if RFK was a good step either. I think it makes more sense than Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think it makes more sense than the Harvey Milk ship that was named. That's no longer named after him. But I mean, as Apostate Nate put it earlier, there are so many combat troops who have not been named, who have not been given this honor, who clearly deserve it. Literally, if you're like, okay, that base that had this last name, it was Smithers. That was a Confederate general, so we can't do that. Just type into Chat GPT, what's a naval veteran, or what's a military veteran with the last name Smithers who was rewarded for bravery. You'll find that person. That's how many of them there are. So to name one after Ruth Bader Ginsburg or to name one after RFK, RFK I think makes more sense once again, but these are not good choices. In fact, let's play this game. Someone
we
give me
don't
a
name
last
like
name.
aircraft, right? We just name naval ships and bases, right? We don't name aircraft like.
Yeah, I don't think an F-16 or a stealth fighter has a name, but I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. I don't, or at least not since like World War II, when they would put the names on the side.
Oh, but that was like Mustang Sally. That was it'd be
Right.
like
Yeah.
a
No.
lady with huge tits on the side of the aircraft.
Yeah.
Wow,
'Cause I remember those as
Mustang
being.
Shannon is the new stealth bomber coming out of Lockheed Martin. There she is, everybody. Yeah. Okay, so let's play this game. Apostate Nate, give me a last name. Any last name.
You mean like any last name?
Yeah, I'm going to see if we can find a military veteran with a decorated career with that last name.
All right. Parker.
Parker. Is there a military veteran with the last name Parker
There is Samuel Parker,
who
recipient of the
served
Medal of Honor.
notably?
Samuel
This is
Parker.
what you do. So if Parker was a Confederate base and they changed the name to the Smithers base, well, Trump comes in. Yes, there have been several notable military veterans named Parker. Here's a look at the most distinguished. Samuel Parker, 1891 to 1975. He was a U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, served in World War I, the 1st Infantry Division, World War II trained troops at Fort Benning. He had the Medal of Honor. Okay, that's pretty good. One of the most highly decorated U.S. soldiers of World War I. Then you have Major General James Parker, who died in 1934, fought in the Indian Wars, the Spanish-American War, the Philippine-American War, where he earned his Medal of Honor in World War I. Oh, those don't age so well. Yeah, Indian War, Spanish American War, Philippine American War. Yeah, that doesn't age so well. It doesn't mean he didn't fight with honor and distinction, but those are not good wars.
There,
Me-
there is a ship named the USS Parker, but it's named after American Civil War general and one of the founders of the United States Naval
oh,
Institute.
well, maybe they can be named now after Samuel Parker. So this
Yeah,
other
it's
Parker, though,
Foxhall.
General James Parker, received the Medal of Honor. Then you have Eli Parker, died in 1895. He's a Seneca Native American from the Seneca Nation. He became the first Native American to reach brevet brigadier general in the Union Army. Chief engineer in key battles like Vicksburg and Chattanooga, and was an aide de camp to Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses Grant. So he drafted the surrender documents at the Appomattox Courthouse. Wow. After the war, served as Grant's Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the first Native American in that role. And look, there's another one. Major General Edwin Parker died in 1983. Captain William Parker, born in 1832, doesn't have a death. Medal of Honor. Oh my gosh. So you just type in any name, you're going to find all these people. So why are we naming ships after Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Why are we naming things after RFK? Why are we naming things after Harvey Milk? Like, this is DEI. This is literally DEI. It doesn't mean that these people are not deserving of other honors and history to remember them. But clearly this is a new thing. This is something that didn't happen as much, if at all, in the past. We got a message from Tribe over on stereo. I apologize. Just now seeing it. It's about 10 minutes old. Let's hear from Tribe.
I don't know why people are against the protest. Protest is something that is very necessary in all over the world. It's something that people have a right to do that. Who doesn't like what is actually happening there? So it's their choice, man. You are none to say that, because it has been the history that America was founded on the basis of freedom to everyone. So you need to respect that, man.
Wow, personal attacks. So America was not founded on the freedom of everyone. It might be read that now, but it was definitely not founded on that. It was white landowner males. But okay, so Shannon or Apostate Nate, who wants to correct my opinions? Am I against protests?
No, you're against riots, like
I'm
everyone should
against
be, but I don't think you're
violence.
against protests.
Yeah, and I'm against violence when you being out there protesting leads to violence. So the majority of people out there could be peaceful. By the way, the majority of people on January 6th were also peaceful protesters. So that goes both ways. But when January 6th happened, if we have another one of those and people go out and they're just like, we're peacefully protesting that we support Trump and we want him to win a third term or something, I would say you're causing violence. You yourself may not be involved, but you being there allows other people to create havoc, to burn things, to attack the Capitol. So if you're protesting right now out in LA, the vast majority of people are peaceful, and the vast majority of people are just exercising their rights under the Constitution. I agree with that. And yes, protests have a long history in the United States, and I'm glad that we live in a country where we can do that. But if you're in LA right now protesting, you are allowing other people to enact violence. You are allowing things to be burned. You are allowing property to be destroyed. You are allowing officers to be assaulted and terrorized. So you are part of the problem right now. They should stop. They should say we need to regroup. And if there are other cities where violence is not happening and you're protesting, go ahead and keep doing that. But when it turns violent, you need to go home. Apostate Nate or Shannon, do you disagree with that?
I don't know. LA is pretty big, and it's only happening in one small area of LA between 3rd and 9th Street. I don't know where that is in LA, but that's where it's happening. But if you're protesting in a different location in LA, because that's a huge city, I mean, it's not like, I don't know, like my Hartford isn't that big. So if we're protesting in Hartford, we're only talking about a couple square miles. but LA is just huge. I suppose it depends on the size of the city and where it is. I mean, if you're in the riots, or I don't agree with them like blocking traffic or stuff like that, protesters blocking traffic and causing disruption that way. Like if you're
I
protesting on
also
a
disagree
sidewalk.
with that in general. You could argue that's peaceful, but no, you cannot
Right.
block
No,
traffic. In
I'm
fact,
with
an
you. I don't.
ambulance was blocked on a bridge in New
Right.
York because people took it over.
Right. No, exactly. I don't agree with them blocking traffic, that they should be arrested for that. If you're peacefully protesting on a sidewalk, fine, but not blocking traffic, not causing violence, or being in that violent section. Um, yeah, I mean, but LA is a bit different because they're just so huge.
Really quickly, this is according to ChatGPT. Key incidents of violence: downtown LA near City Hall, Grand Park. There's 2 mentions there of violent times. Then raids and clashes in the fashion district, a Home Depot in Westlake, and a clothing wholesaler.
That's where it started, right? The clothing wholesaler and the Home Depot. That's where it started, right? Where they went in and.
I've purposely been not following it because I just want people to go home. Then there was unrest in other neighborhoods like Compton, where protesters reportedly hurled gas bottle-like containers at police. Nighttime skirmishes in Little Tokyo. So those are the 3 that they've pointed. 4. Well, they say different neighborhoods, but right now it's saying Little Tokyo, Westlake, Compton, the Fashion District, and City Hall, Grand Park. So I think it's a little bit more than
People
what you
must
said
really
earlier.
not like. They must not like autonomous vehicles either, because they burned 6 of the autonomous taxis.
And from what I heard on Jon Stewart, they actually called them, and then when they arrived, they like trashed them and set them on fire and spray painted them. So that I gotta say,
Yeah,
credit
I
where
didn't hear
credit's
that they
due.
called them. I just saw.
Let's call them in, but hopefully the person who called them in was brought to justice, because that'll be tracked to your account. Yes, you have your hand up, Apostate Nate.
So here are my thoughts on whether people should go home once it turns violent and whether that's an endorsement. Um, this isn't exactly the most centralized protest. I mean, this really started with people, just sort of spreading the word. And I'm sure that you had some outlets spreading the word more. But here's how I would feel. Let's say that I take off work. I've been passionate for years about politics. I want to organize and get some maybe friends out there to peacefully protest. I make a sign. I take some measures to make sure it's going to be safe for me and those around me. And then I get there, and then I find out that 8 blocks away, somebody set a car on fire and it's getting a little out of hand. And I think to myself, why the hell do I have to go home? Tell them to go home. This is my peaceful protest, not yours.
But they're not going to
That
go
was
home. And if all the peaceful protesters go home, it's easier for police to deal with those people who are not peaceful.
That's true logistically. I just don't know that for the reasons that I cited, I can go as far as to say that the people there have have functionally endorsed the violence. I can't go that far, Lee.
That's fair. And I think that's a perspective thing. I could see that you could argue it either way. What I can tell you is I've been to some protests. And the second that I saw them turning, I left. I absolutely left. I didn't want to be involved in that. I didn't want to have something happen to me. But also, I was like, I'm done. I'm going home. I have absolutely done that more than once in the recent history of my life. I'm not in LA, so can't speak to that. I'm sure there's been other incidents of violence across the country. Luckily, this hasn't turned into Black Lives Matter level of violence or January 6th level of violence. But I said the same thing during the pandemic. Why are you guys out there? It's the pandemic, first of all. I'm home. I've said it on the show multiple times. We have a message on stereo. I'm going to get to that. Thanks for leaving that. And then when it turned into defund the police, that didn't make any sense. And I've been proven correct. All those cities refunded the police, and many of them actually gave them more money than they had previously once it was refunded, because they found out that the police needed money. In the United States, if you have problems going on, money. And we can talk about NPR and like, well, is it Apostate Nate made the great comment? Is it going to fix it by taking away the money? Okay, that's a discussion we can have. I think that's a different discussion, but the point still stands in both arenas, if you will. Let's jump over here. We're going to start wrapping up the show. I'm up against a hard deadline. I just have to head out. But let's hear now from, hey, it's Stereo Royalty, Miss Smitty. Great to hear from you. Thanks for giving us your message. Take it away.
A little bit of perspective from here in LA. There have been peaceful protests every single day for the past week. There have been a very few isolated incidents where things turn violent after a protest, generally in the evening or something like that, in a very small pocket of Los Angeles. All over the city, people are peacefully protesting. I strongly, strongly disagree that the people protesting should stop. We're being terrorized, not just by ICE, but by the militarization of our city. And people are not going to stand for it. And I support the protests. I think that we need to get ICE out of LA. I think we need the National Guard and the troops out of LA. It's a gross overreach by the president.
So, Miss Spitty, I appreciate that perspective, especially because it's very different from everything else we've heard on the show. Please leave us messages. I wish you the best. I hope you stay safe, and please let us know more perspective coming from LA. I had forgotten that you were based in that area, if you've mentioned that on the show before, and I would love to hear more from you. That's really valuable. So thank you for that. I disagree. It is not a small pocket. We just mentioned that there's also been looting that's been going on in more than a few places. That was not mentioned by ChatGPT, but looting that's been reported, that's happening, that's not debatable. And yes, once again, the majority of protesters are peaceful, but they were peaceful during Black Lives Matter as well. We know what happened there. They were peaceful during defund the police, and we know what happened there. The majority of protesters were peaceful and unarmed on January 6th, and that didn't stop that from happening. So I don't know that it does any good to mention that, because it doesn't matter. 1 out of every 100 people could be violent, and that leads to what's happening in the LA area right now. You mentioned you're being terrorized by ICE. We can disagree on ICE's methods, but they are enforcing the law. So I would disagree with that. We can talk about the methods, but what they're doing is enforcing the rule of the law that no one has wanted to enforce. And that's why we have the problems that we have now. So again, I respectfully disagree with that. Trying to remember anything else that you said. Apostate Nate or Shannon, if you guys can remember anything that she said that I did not address, please do so, because I'm a dummy and I may have forgotten. But yes, Shannon, your hand is up.
No, I'm with her that Trump is absolutely doing an overreach. The governor should be in charge of that if he wants the military brought in, not Trump.
But then all he has to do is send in the Marines, which he can do legally. So there's a workaround for that. Yes.
We're debating that in
He
court
doesn't
now.
have control of the National Guard. Normally, this is the first time it was done without permission of the governor, but he can send the Marines there. Do you disagree?
Well, it's not the first time, because I mean, JFK would be the first time during the civil rights movement, sent in National Guard without the governor's permission.
I'll have to look this up. It could have been, at least in our lifetime, in the last several decades, this is the first time that precedent has been broken. Yeah. Let me look that up.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was JFK was the first time without governor approval to send, but that was to enforce a constitutional amendment. So kind of a different.
Oh, that was for the schools. That was for the integration, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
So we like it when we agree with it, but we don't like it when Trump does it.
But it's two different situations, right? One's to enforce a constitutional amendment that was made, and the governor said, no, I'm not doing that, even though that's the law of the land, whereas Trump's just sending it in because he can here. I mean, there's no two different situations is what I'm saying.
They're certainly not the same, but I think you could successfully argue without endorsing Trump, because I do not endorse Trump, that he's enforcing the rule of law. There is violence. And once again, ICE is a legal entity that is enforcing the law. So this is what ChatGPT says. So thank you, Shannon. I appreciate this. I'm a dummy. I don't know things. I get them wrong all the time. So it's great to have you and other people on the show that keep me honest. No, President Trump is not the first to send in the National Guard without a governor's approval, but his action in June of 2025 marked the first time in roughly 60 years it has happened. In 1957, President Eisenhower federalized the National Guard in Arkansas over the governor's objection to enforce school integration and sent the 101st Airborne Division to accompany them. Wow, the 101st. In 1967, President Johnson invoked the Insurrection Act to deploy federal troops in Detroit and National Guard units to suppress violent unrest. Okay, so that's what President Trump's doing now, federal troops and National Guard. In 1992, President George H.W. Bush, federalized the California National Guard during the Rodney King riots after Governor Wilson requested, but coordination issues caused federal overreach concerns. So I guess they just didn't cross the T's and dot the I's on that one. And Trump invoked Title 10 via the Insurrection Act to federalize up to 4,000 California National Guard troops, bypassing Governor Newsom, not responding to a state request. A federal judge ruled it illegal and unconstitutional, the first time this specific power has been challenged in court since the 1960s. The Ninth Circuit, however, temporarily allowed the deployment to continue pending an appeal. That's the last one that I saw, is that pending an appeal, he still can have those federalized National Guard troops. So I guess that's how they do it, is they don't just take the National Guard. They say these National Guard troops are now federal troops, and therefore I can do this. And if we look at the historical context back to 1957, it doesn't mention JFK here. So maybe it's missing one. I don't know.
That
But it
was
does
my
mention
fault. Yeah, it was
Eisenhower
Johnson,
did that.
it was Johnson, not JFK. That was my
Okay,
fault.
it's Johnson.
I just
Yeah. That's
because
okay. It's all right.
yeah.
But there is context here that we can look at, and in the past, it happened. It's the first time it's happened in roughly 60 years that it's been done without the consent of a governor. Because once again, George H.W. Bush did have a request from Governor Wilson, but coordination issues caused federal overreach concerns. I'm going to go ahead and chop that one up to paperwork and say it's not like the others. So if we look at the others, we have Trump in June, we have Johnson in 67, and we have Eisenhower in 1957. I think that's enough context to say that there's precedent that this is happening. It has not explicitly been outlawed. Maybe that will happen now. It says that what happened here with Trump in June is the first time it has been challenged in court since the 1960s. And once again, it's temporarily been allowed to continue pending the appeal from when a judge said it was illegal and unconstitutional, a federal judge. Miss Smitty is still with us. We'd love to hear what you think. Feel free to disagree with what we've just said here. Give us just an update more of what's going on in LA. But I think factually, it's not just a small area in LA. It has gone to other areas. And once again, even if it is a small area and LA is large, or what is just kind of referred to as LA, even though it may be different cities, I just personally, I have been in protests recently, not last week, but recently, and I have left when I saw it turning violent. And I encourage other people to do so. I think that's the adult thing to do. I think that's the right thing to do. I think that's the moral thing to do. I think that's the thing to do to show that you will not be a part of violence. I know Apostate Nate and I disagree, but if you are there and people are being violent, your presence makes it easier for them to continue that violence. That is a hill I die on. And I hope Miss Smitty stays safe. I hope other people out there stay safe. And I hope the cops beat the shit out of people who are being violent. I have no problem with that happening within the law. But if it's allowed, beat the shit out of those people, arrest them, and bring them to justice. That is a hill I die on. Anyone else want to give final thoughts? We might have to wrap up here unless something happens on my end to give me more time. But I want to give people their final thoughts. We have Shannon and Apostate Nate joining me as speakers. They're my awesome friends and patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporters. We also have some people over on Stereo. So give me a last message on Stereo if you want to say something more. Otherwise, let's go to Apostate Nate. Final thoughts.
Well, Lee, maybe I would disagree with you slightly on the beating the hell out of them. I mean, I think whatever force is needed to stop their violent actions and subdue them, take them into custody. Well, if that involves beating, if that's what it takes, then sure. I don't know that would be my mantra.
I accept your updated definition of beating the shit out of them. I agree with that. Yes.
And that would be my final thought there, Lee. I mean, if you're going to be violent at a protest, expect violence from the police.
Shannon?
I think the rhetoric is getting out of hand, especially if you heard like Trump talking about the protesters at his parade, or the sheriff down in Florida on Brevard County that came out yesterday about the protests tomorrow that are scheduled. Because the No Kings protest is scheduled for tomorrow in all 50 states and 1,800 cities and towns. And the rhetoric of it just being protesters and not rioters to be shot is or face harsh consequences depending on who you're referring to, because the one in Florida was pretty dramatic. I'll try to find it for you, but unless you want to wrap up, that's up to you, and then we can wrap up. But the rhetoric that they're spreading that all protesters are violent is not the case. That's
well, yes, but I think the rhetoric from the right, specifically President Trump saying all protesters are violent. In my book, that's the same thing as peaceful protesters downplaying the violence, which is what I hear from the left.
Right, but I mean, he's the president. That's the difference. Is saying that because he could take drastic action in all 50 states tomorrow if just because people are protesting. If he
unfortunately, Donald Trump is the president. He won a clear victory this second term, or for the second term, I should say. And so anything he says is amplified. That's the problem with Donald Trump. But in my book, saying all protesters are dangerous and should be dealt with versus, oh, these are peaceful protests, it's the same thing to me. It's a lie. It's technically the majority of people are peaceful, but it's a, how would I say, it's a substance lie. It's ignoring the violence by focusing on the fact that the majority of people, and in all these other neighborhoods where things have not hit the fan, are peaceful. It's a straw man argument. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the violence. Why aren't people on the left focusing on the violence and saying we should go home? So in my book, it's the same thing, but you're right. Someone like Miss Smitty, who's promoting the good things about the protest, and the other person we heard previously on Stereo who's promoting the good things about protesting in the United States, they are missing the substantial, real big focus here is that the small amount of people, whatever percentage it is, they are ruining it for everyone else. And that's the true terror in my book. It's not what ICE is doing, which is we can talk about their methods, but they are enforcing the law. It's not what the police are doing. We can talk about the methods and we can talk about individual instances where maybe police cross the line, but they are reacting to violence.
Well, ICE isn't reacting to violence. They're
ICE is enforcing the law.
Their methods are right. They're not, that's what I'm agreeing with you that their methods I do not agree with whatsoever, but they are enforcing the law. You're right. And like Apostate Nate said, if you're 8 blocks away from the violence and you're protesting peacefully and not causing the violence, I don't see the reason to go home. But the people that are causing the violence aren't really protesting, right? They're now rioters. They're not protesters anymore. So yes, the police have every right to
I
stop
guess
them
I
from
guess
rioting.
it's I look at it like the pandemic. So let's say COVID-19, which was caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it's bad explanation that we have to live with, was something that was clearly everyone knew they had COVID-19. They were suffering from COVID-19. And there was a mark that formed on your arm when you had COVID-19. I would still stay home because it was a pandemic and we were trying to once again, the lockdowns were wrong, we shouldn't have done them, but barring a reason to leave, I just would have stayed home. And that's what I did because I did my part. I tried to help others who would not help themselves. I always wore a mask. I wore a mask way past what most people would consider the end of the pandemic, and I still do. So I'm doing my part to try to make it better. And I would say if you're a protester in LA right now, go home and do your part to make it better. It has reached the point that it needs to stop, at least temporarily, so that the people who are causing the violence directly can be dealt with, and then go back out onto the streets and maybe think about where you go and what you're around. And think about the
Oh, absolutely.
communities who are suffering in the past so they don't have to suffer again.
Right. That's like I said, I don't think they should be blocking streets because now you're stopping people from, like you said, the ambulance in New York,
Yeah, I'm sure it
use
happened
that
more than once,
ambulance
but there's
or
a
fire truck
high-profile
for-
ambulance that was stuck on a bridge. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like that's not helping your community. Even if you're protesting for a good cause, that's not stopping traffic is not helping your community.
So, for
because you're-
instance, if there's no violence and protesters in LA are peacefully in one neighborhood blocking a road, just as an example, hypothetical, whether or not that's happened recently, and an ambulance gets stuck and there's a real tragic consequence of that, I would say go ahead and stop protesting and try to figure out where do we need to go. And so the people who want to be there and they want to have their voice heard and they don't want to cause damage to other people, especially people in an ambulance who really need that immediate help, rethink where you are and take a break and then go back out. ICE is not going to stop. You're not going to stop ICE. You can give it a couple of days. Let's recoup and think about where we're going. Let's only go to parks from now on. Maybe that's less effective, it's less disruptive, and that's the point of a protest. But like when you have a negative consequence, even just like blocking an ambulance, stop, regroup. Maybe you don't need to stop and regroup as much as I would suggest for LA in general right now, but stop, regroup, and say, we don't want this to happen again. I never see that from these sort of protests. And maybe I'm not looking, maybe it has happened, but generally I see the opposite. Hey, we're peaceful. And you downplay the violence, you downplay the fact that your participation allows the violence to occur. I want people to step back. That's all I'm asking. I understand that people disagree, but I think that's really important. And I think if they stepped back, maybe not Trump, he would not give you credit for that. But if you step back, I think other Americans who are pissed off by this and maybe support Trump, but are not Trump themselves, would feel less personally pissed off because of these protests. I think there could be some positive consequences all around. All right. Really appreciate everybody. Oh, yeah, Shannon, final thought, and then we'll end.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I think it should be more like we just had a big strike at Pratt and Whitney. They build a lot of the aircraft for the military, obviously. But they were on strike. And the way they do it is to get it out across like if you want to cross the street, they'll wait for the crosswalk and they'll do their protest across the crosswalk and wait on the other side and then wait for the crosswalk and then do it again. But they won't block the traffic, when it's not on the crosswalk.
Not all heroes wear capes. Some people are reasonable protesters. Thank you for that, Shannon. Appreciate you. Appreciate Apostate Nate, Reggie, everybody else who's been a part of today's show, the guy who left me the message originally on stereo, and then as well as Mrs. Smitty. Appreciate you guys. Go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate for all my links, and patreon.com/NEWZ debate to support the show, like Shannon and Apostate Nate and MC Funk, Lola, Sneaky Elbow, Ron, Bjorn, and a bunch of others on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. Big thanks to everybody. That's going to be the end of the show. Hope to have you join me again sometime soon. I'll post my upcoming shows on twitter.com/NEWZ debate and also our Discord server that you can join by going to bit.ly/NEWZ debates. That's going to be it. Yeah, Shannon?
Are you homely or are you still on the road?
No, still traveling. I've been back home a couple of times to check on things, but yeah, I'm having a lot of fun visiting people and being out of the house. I got to make up for lost times since I was home so long for COVID. It's been really good. I have my travel set up sort of honed in now. Still trying to make sure that it's okay. But yeah, every once in a while I might do a show from home. Thanks for checking in on me. Appreciate that. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.